Welcome. Today is Tuesday, May 17th. This is a work session of the Pitkin County Board of County Commissioners. It is 1 o'clock, and we have on our agenda starting at 1. We will be opening a special meeting as the Board of Social Services, which the Board of Commissioners serves as. And this is our 2022 first quarter update. And we have staff calling in, so please, welcome.
Hello, thank you all. I think we have 2 staff people who need to be promoted to panelists.
Skylar's on it.
Awesome. Thank you, Skylar.
Thank you, Skylar.
You're welcome.
Okay.
So there's Sam and Matt. Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm Lindsay Maish, the Director of Human Services, and I'm here today with Sam Lander-Casper, Manager of Economic Assistance, Matt McGaw, the Manager of Adult and Family Services, and Audrey Warner, who is our Finance Analyst. Today, the Board of County Commissioners serves as our Board of Social Services by statute in our home rule charter here to approve expenditures and client payrolls. We do this quarterly. Today, each department will be providing updates that will help you all, for whoever is attending CCI this year, to provide some updates for you about our relationships right now with the state, some of the things that we are managing, and also to help you understand the current landscape of that between our local county Department of Human Services and state organizations. In Colorado, the Department of Human Services is state supervised, county administered. Department of Human Services is responsible for all programming and allocations and expenditures related to all of the activities that we do. This includes economic assistance, adult and family services, and other activities of county human services. And just a reminder that in Pitkin County, most of our activities are managed in our department, except for a few. So the few that we contract with are one with Garfield County for child support and long-term care. We have an intergovernmental agreement with Goodwill to provide LEAP eligibility determination. And we contract with Prowers County for child and adult protection hotline services. So today we're going to look at the first quarter 2022 expenditures and payrolls. And a question that came up in our last Board Social Services update was around why our revenues were higher than expenditures. And I'm going to just quickly address that before we start to jump into it. So this is a result of our allocations following the state fiscal year, which is July to June. And then closeout occurs on the state fiscal year, which includes costs from the previous 6 months, so that sometimes makes our revenues look higher. This reporting today, what you'll see, is based on the calendar year. So the Board of Social Services is now going to review the first quarter, January through March expenditures and payrolls. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Audrey Warner, our finance analyst, just to start us off.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you. The first chart that you'll be looking at does break down the human services.
Hey, Audrey, sorry to interrupt you. Hold on. Let's get our presentation up. Can I share our screen so we can show the expenditures? Hold on 1 second. And I will try to share my screen and see if I can get it up there. Hold on. How do I do this? Oh. All right, can you all let me know if you are seeing this screen? And then I'm going to stop seeing here. Can you see it? Yep.
Yep.
Okay, great. Here we go, right into it.
Thank you.
So you're all familiar with this chart. It's the typical chart that we start off with. This does cover human services budget to year-to-date actuals, January through March, the first quarter of 2022. It breaks it down by program area. I won't go into each and every line item, but just wanted to go over a few important notes to summarize what we're looking at here. The first important area to discuss is total programs. In the first quarter 2022, human services program expenditures are at 25%. Which is right on track for budget. Program revenues we're seeing at 29%, resulting in a little bit of a surplus position to start the year. As Lindsay previously stated, this reporting does cover the calendar year, whereas human services is budgeted to the state fiscal year, July through June, based on our funding allocation. And like she said, that can make our revenues appear slightly higher than our expenditures. Temporary assistance for needy families, or TANF as we call it for short. Again, I like to point this out just to say all staff salaries are fully budgeted in the Human Services Fund. However, the budget does not allocate out salaries and benefits to each and every program area. The budget for TANF salaries and benefits are actually included in the administration and economic assistance areas, but some of those actual costs are charged to TANF. And so for this reason, the TANF expenditures will show at a higher percentage than budget throughout the year. Childcare, human services continues to see that expenditures are low, again, due to childcare facility closures or taking children to care less often due to fear of exposure in relation to the pandemic. These percentages of revenues and expenditures are actually similar to this time last year. So we're seeing the same trend in childcare. Child support services. Garfield County actually manages these services for Pitkin County, and they reported that Pitkin County's cases have been low so far this year, which is resulting in less case management expenditures. Another area to look at is adult protection services, or APS as we call it for short. APS services are trending slightly below average due to reduced time spent on APS case management needs, along with no training requirements so far in the first quarter of 2022. In conclusion, overall, the budget versus actual look good, and human services will continue to review and update the BOCC as the year progresses.
Great. I love it when you call us the boss.
I love that acronym.
I know. Like, who's the boss in this? Yeah.
Board of Social Services. You just happen to have a great acronym.
We do.
And so if you, well, the second chart, we're basically just looking at the expenditures. And if you don't have any questions, if you do, I'll leave this time open for any questions. And otherwise, we can vote to approve the expenditures.
So do I have any questions from the board, or do I have a motion to approve the 2022 first quarter expenditures?
So moved.
I'll second.
I have a motion. I have a second. Not seeing any other questions or comments, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. All right, we can move on.
All right, I'm Sam Landercasper. I manage the Economic Assistance Department for Pickens County, and what we're looking at here are our program payrolls, which we ask the Board of Social Services to approve each quarter. These are direct benefits to our customers, so it looks a little different from what Audrey just presented, but this is where we're representing the money that goes, directly to our customers or to the folks who are providing services. And really this quarter, we called out a couple trends you'll see in the memo that we wrote up. Really, we wanted to call out the child care assistance, where we have seen, I know Audrey said the expenditures are a little low annually, but in this quarter, we did see a little bit of a rebound back to what we were looking at 2020 pre-pandemic. So you'll see that the expenditures were just over 38,000 in the first quarter, which is good to see because this is moving back towards where we were, right around when the pandemic started, and we'd seen a little bit less engagement and lower expenditures over the last couple of years. So we're hoping that this trend continues. This just, means that hopefully folks are able to be getting their children back into care as they need to. We also wanted to look at the Colorado Works TANF program expenditures, which, as you'll see here, are quite low. However, we have been working to contract. One way we can use our allocation for this program is the contract services. We are working with Adult and Family Services to help provide some funding to provide prevention services for families to help avoid having them get into, I'm sure Matt could explain this better, but really get to avoid having full-on referrals and engagement there. It provides a lot of services that can help families that might be struggling a little bit. And then we also are looking at working with a couple of our providers for summer camps to help create additional positions for those. So we really appreciate the flexibility in the TANF program for the spending. We just don't see a lot of direct benefits to customers because the income limits for the program are so low that most people don't qualify for regular ongoing assistance in that program. We also saw a lot of folks who received assistance early on in the pandemic in the form of what's called a diversion, which is a larger lump sum payment, which then disqualifies them from additional assistance for a period of 24 months. So that probably has some impact as well. And then finally, we're looking at the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP or food assistance. You can see that those expenditures are still quite high. The reason for that is that our caseloads remain high, but also that at this time, the federal government is still approving the emergency SNAP benefits or allotments on a month-to-month basis. We expect that to continue through June. And what that means is that any household that qualifies for SNAP gets the maximum allotment for that household size. So for a lot of our customers, that means a significant increase in benefits. And that's something that, we are concerned about when those benefits stop, especially among our older adult population, because typically due to the way income is counted, their SNAP allotments can be slightly lower. And removing these maximum benefits are going to have a pretty big impact on folks who've been having them now for, up to 2 years at this point. So, but as of right now, we have been told that we should expect that to continue through June, possibly longer, depending on the state of the public health emergency. The rest of the programs, there weren't really any noticeable increases or decreases or trends that we wanted to call out. But if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Kelly has a question.
Hi, Sam. Nice to see you and Lindsay and Audrey and the whole team. I'm wondering, do any of these programs contribute to like income limits for income taxes? Are they counted as income when people report their taxes?
No, none of these are required to be reported. And most of the folks, I'd say 95%, would be kind of falling under those limits for taxes anyway. But no, these benefits aren't. The vast majority aren't direct cash benefits anyway. They're almost more of a pass through, like with child care assistance, the providers are paid. The SNAP program, it's a benefit that's issued to a card that can only be utilized in supermarkets. Really, the only programs that provide a cash benefit to folks are the old age pension, aid to the needy disabled, and the Colorado Works or TANF program.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
So Sam, I have a question. I'm just not sure where to ask it or to whom. This morning I saw a van pull into City Market, and it was either, I think it was Harvest for the Hungry. Do they go in and get like day-old produce and stuff like that, or?
Yeah, so Harvest for Hunger, we were fortunate enough early on in the pandemic to be able to get some CARES Act funding through CDHS to purchase a refrigerated, heated van. And then Gray War, who runs Harvest for Hunger, he created actually Harvest for Hunger to utilize that van to do food rescue up and down the valley. So I don't know the exact number, but to date they've rescued something. I believe the last time I spoke with them, they were rescuing between 3,000 to 4,000 pounds of food a month. So that's been a great program, and we're looking at how we can continue to work that into our food security system here in the region.
Well, thank you, because I saw them working today at City Market, and I kind of thought that might be what it was, and that was great to see. So thank you.
It's great that they can do that. I tried to get produce that was being pulled off the shelves for my pigs years ago.
You couldn't.
And they wouldn't give them, and they said, no, we have to make sure this food is safe.
You have to throw it in the
And-
garbage.
Yeah, it was really, so it's great that they're rescuing
So
food.
if we don't have any further questions, Sam, I believe you need a vote on this.
Please.
I'll make a motion to approve the 2022 first quarter payrolls.
I'll second it.
I have a motion. I got a second from Francie. Any questions from the board? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna turn this back, I think, to Lindsay, yeah?
Yep, let's see if I can get technology to play with me here. Can you see the considerations and trends now? That's what you're all seeing? Just wanna make sure I can
Yes,
see
we've
you.
got that.
I'm going to do my best to represent Chad Federowitz with Senior Services. This is his update on the Colorado Commission on Aging. Chad is on a very well-deserved vacation right now,
Oh,
so
good for him.
in my representation, if there are questions that you might have, I will make sure to bring them back to him if I am unable to answer them. So now we're going to just present some information about the relationship, some of the relationships we have that may help you all be informed and ready when you go, if you're attending CCI or in other sort of capacities, about how our relationships are going with the state right now. So I'll speak first to the Colorado Commission on Aging, and then Matt McGaw will talk about Adult Protection Services mitigation. And then I'm going to speak to the Office of Early Childhood. That was something you had all asked for us to circle back on. And then Sam and I will be talking about HICPA at the end. So I'll start with the Colorado Commission on Aging. So with the signing of the modernization of the older Coloradoans Act, a new and larger commission on aging will be formed. And the Strategic Action Planning Group on Aging, which is SAPCA. I know Steve Child is very informed about what I'm talking about right now. Will sunset. So the SAPCA is going to sunset and
Some
new
kind of
commission will come
allergy.
on.
Thank you.
So both of these groups are planning to attend a conference this summer. And the conference in June, And the conference is really intended to focus on strategic planning and the formation of this newer commission. So whenever there's change like this in a system, there's natural tension that exists in how the business is handed off from the older commission and how it's being implemented into the new commission. So we just wanted to speak to that a little bit and know that the change around the direction and the way that priorities are being set is really to include some of the input from the balance of state counties. I think it sounds like, from what I'm hearing from Chad and from our policy advisory groups, that the Big Ten have a lot of input and there's not as much input from the balance of state. Senior Services and Chad are going to continue looking for opportunities to collaborate and find some shared vision moving forward. And I know that Chad wanted to just call out and appreciate, Steve, the work that you've done to help with this process, but also to give you some of this information to make sure that you have it for this conference that's coming up in June. I'm going to pause there and ask for questions.
Steve does have a question. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, not a question so much, but just some more information. The conference will be on June 16th. It's at the Antlers Hotel in Colorado Springs. We just had a planning meeting today, which Chad is on with me, is on the committee doing the planning for the conference. So it's kind of going to be a celebration of the old CCOA and the SAPCA, which will be sunsetted on June 30th of this year per the state legislature, because we accomplished our mission. And looking forward to the new CCOA and helping to launch it starting September 1st. Now, Chad has applied to be on the new CCOA. And I have not, I'm not planning on applying to be on the new CCOA. But the deadline for applications for that were May 20th, or still are May 20th, but there are several positions which they have not had applicants for. And I think that the deadline will be extended for all applications for the new CCOA. So the three areas where they did not have any applications on the last reliable information we had were someone who's an expert in housing, transportation, and long-term care. So if you know anybody across the state who's been active in those areas, I think particularly as they relate to the aging population, we need to urge people to apply for those three slots. They have specific slots that they need to fill based on the Modernization Act, and they also need to try to balance the number of Democrats, number of Republicans, and non-affiliated on the board, and they're trying to also balance it geographically, so they have rural areas of the state well represented, as well as the Front Range urban areas, which always have been overwhelmingly represented on things. So that's just a quick update on the process that's going on right now.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Okay, I don't see any more questions from the board.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Matt McGaugh with Adult and Family Services. I have our next update. I was going to talk about the adult protection services and mitigation. I just wanted to make you all aware, there could be some budget implications because the state has informed us this year that they're not going to be mitigating counties who overspend their allocation. And so to back up a little bit, each year we get an allocation from the state to provide adult protection services. And usually, typically each year, most counties are overspending this allocation. And each July, the state will come back and make sure to mitigate each county's for any of the over expenditures. And this year they informed us mid-year, Lindsay's first week on the job, that they weren't going to be mitigating adult protection services this year. And so what that means is that we're looking at an over expenditure of about 10 to 15% over our allocation, which, you know, is about roughly $8,000 to $10,000 that we're looking to, if we need to cover that at the end of this year, we're looking at using our fund balance to cover that, which is something that we anticipated could happen. So it's not a huge alarm, but it is something that we're paying attention to. And, you know, I think to let you all be aware of this is we're really trying to advocate with the state to consider how they allocate these funds for each county. If you look at the resort counties across the state, all of them are overspent, and most of them, if not all of them, are more overspent than Pickens County. So it goes to show that it's kind of a statewide issue on how they're doing their formulas for adult protection, and it does impact the amount we get. And so we're looking at not only not getting mitigated this year, but a reduction in our allocation for next year. And so I think us, and along with other counties across the state, we're taking note of this and really trying to work with the state on making sure that there's a fair allocation for this service, because it's mandated, and it's something that it's uncontrollable on how much time we need to spend and allocate towards this. It's really based on the need, the amount of reports that we get, the severity of the reports that we get. And so just something that I wanted to make you all aware of. And, please let me know if you have any questions or comments on that.
Yeah, Matt, I do. Well, what is the state's justification if the counties are all being overspent? Means there must be a need out there, and the state is saying, fine, we know there's a need, and the need is growing, so we're going to give you less money.
Well, we were surprised to see the reduction, because Lindsay and I had a nice meeting with a state representative who was advocating for us to receive more of an allocation and appeared to be on our side with that, and left us feeling optimistic, to be honest. And then there was a memo it was a draft for next year's allocation, and it was a reduction. And so it was a little perplexing to see that. And that's why I think it's important to bring this up to you all. It's important for Lindsay and I to pay attention to this. And, at some point, if we have to readjust how we are looking at our staff and their functions, we might have to readjust a few things. But right now, we're really just trying to understand from the state what this is going to look like in the next couple of years.
Sorry, I have a tickle in my throat.
That's okay. I had the same question for our state representative, and this is just starting to tee up for you some of the, we're feeling this kind of growing adversarial sort of relationship in our relationships between local, county, Department of Human Services, and state. And this is one area where we're feeling that. We're feeling that tension, definitely. And working together with not only our Northwest directors, but also we've now joined with the Southwest directors as well for Human Services to think through how we can advocate on different policy or, in our allocation committees, how we can advocate for these kinds of things.
Well, let us know what we might be able to do to help you. Kelly.
I just want to clarify, when you say the conversations that you've had, that was with the state rep for the Department of Human Services?
Well, it's someone that specifically works for the Adult Protection Services. So whatever, I think it might be a division or an office of within Human Services.
Okay, that's helpful to understand. Okay, thank you.
That's what I get for
Yeah,
eating chocolate.
they reached out to us and set up that meeting. So they're trying to communicate with us. It just didn't, it's not really making a lot of sense to us right now. So I think we still have some questions for the state.
Are they accompanying this with an audit of sorts about whether the money statewide is being used efficiently?
They're currently doing a workload survey, and that's something that we are participating in as a county so that we can inform them of our needs. And so they're aware, hopefully we'll be more aware of what those needs are and what that looks like in each jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm. And just so, I think I have a good idea, but myself and the public understand, can you just illustrate what an adult protective case looks like so people can sort of understand what types of services are at risk here?
Sure. So we receive adult protection reports, usually for adults who are considered at risk And at risk is really defined where they're not physically able to meet their own needs, have the mental capacity to meet their own needs, or have the resources to have someone help them meet their own needs. And that could be, daily, things at their home. It's definitely around their health and their nourishment and things like that. So we get reports usually from professionals that see some of our older, more vulnerable adults, usually in healthcare facilities and things like that. They'll make reports that are often around self-neglect for some of our older, more vulnerable adults. And so that's typically what we see, and a report would come in, and then we would screen the report to determine whether or not we should have an adult protection response. Because we don't think the government should be going out on every single one if it doesn't meet a certain criteria. So if it doesn't reach out, we screen those out, but we still reach out to try to help people. And that's where we have a care navigation program and case management. And so we can do that for people. It's optional, it's prevention. And then we have a track that obviously the state has rules, and we're mandated to go out and do an assessment to determine if an adult is able to meet their needs. And then within that, we try to come up with support plans and have an ongoing case to try to connect people to supports. And this, it's not just self-neglect. There can be caretaker neglect. There can be caretaker abuse. In Pitkin County, we do see a lot of financial exploitation as well. So a lot of these kind of include an investigation, an assessment, and then a service plan. So there's kind of these three phases to an adult protection case. One of the things that can be challenging is adults can refuse services. So we might find a safety concern and have a huge concern, but they don't have to work with our caseworker. And at that point, the county has options to look at legal interventions. It's typically not something we do in adult protection, but it is an option. So just to answer your question, there's a lot that goes into that, but there's the reporting phase, and then there's that kind of intake, and then we have assessment and case. So there's different phases that we're trying to gather information and then really support people by understanding the situation. We're trying to really give them their voice to let us know what they need help with, and then we try to connect them with that.
Great, thank you, Matt. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Okay, Matt, anything else?
No, thank you.
Thanks, nice to see you.
Good to see you, thanks.
All right, Miss Lindsay, what's up?
All right, let's talk about the Office of Early Childhood. So just to provide a little bit of context, the Office of Early Childhood, OEC, was created last year through House Bill 21-1304 in order to better coordinate early childhood in order to roll out universal preschool and universal pre-K. So that's just kind of the overview of the Office of Early Childhood, and to provide some input for you all on our current relationship and kind of what's happening in that world. There has been, as we've referred to, a little bit of tension in the way that the Office of Early Childhood is rolling out the work. So the Colorado Human Services Directors Association, CHSDA, have collective concerns about the progression and the way it's going to impact our local programming in human services in our departments. So where the concerns are existing are around the process. So the process and to develop the Office of Early Childhood, there is a lack of a rulemaking board. And essentially what's happening is in order to move this department forward to be able to make the rules quickly, there's a lack of a rulemaking authority, and unilateral decision making is being given to the executive director of the Office of Early Childhood. Collectively, human services directors are opposed to this and feel like there's not going to be enough input into some of the rules that are going to be made, especially when it's around some of the programming that we're offering, like CCAP subsidies or CPP so both CCAP and CPP are moving under the Office of Early Childhood, and we don't really know how that's going to impact us. What we're thinking is that because both of those programs require county and school district taxpayer dollars, without an active rulemaking board or shared accountability structure, this could result in unfunded mandates for us that we wouldn't, that we're not prepared for, right? So it's something that there is a position paper. I think I sent it, Kelly, I think I sent it to you, position paper, that's a collective position on some of these issues around the Office of Early Childhood. And it's really around this issue with the executive director having unilateral decision-making without input from some sort of accountability structure. So the human services directors don't necessarily disagree with the ideas of the Office of Early Childhood. They're just in disagreement around the execution or how it's being formed. So we're working really closely on these changes and basically how they will operate. So just to kind of summarize, there's a lot of unknowns right now. So the Office of Early Childhood is moving forward really quickly. And some of those unknowns include the implementation of the universal pre-K and how it's going to affect CCAP and CPP. The movement of several family strengthening and child maltreatment programs. There's discussion of some of those also moving under the Office of Early Childhood, and we really have no idea how that would impact our local programming. And then finally, there are local coordinating there's a grant out for local coordination organizations, LCOs, to help coordinate with all of these changes that are happening under the Office of Early Childhood. And there has been little or no guidance on how the local coordinating organizations are going to function for us. We understand that the Rocky Mountain Council of Early Childhood is applying to be a local coordination organization. And we don't really have an understanding of how regionally we're going to play with that or how it's going to affect us. So let me stop there and ask for any questions. I'll do the best.
Kelly, please.
Yeah, I just want to, I guess, just make a comment because I was sort of listening, following the conversations when this was moving through the legislature, and my takeaway was that it was like a no-go for the governor on setting up a rules committee at this point, and that was part of just the give, right, in getting this done. I don't know if there was something that went into the bill about like in 2 to 3 years if that structure was going to get established or not. But I know I do recognize that there's concern there. I'm curious, do you feel like there's like a shared goal, like are there shared goals that we could focus on to help with this rollout? Is the goal that, families will have one place to go for financial, support, for childcare? Is Kids First, which is just an additional layer in on top of that, like where does the Family Resource Centers layer in on top of that, so that we're kind of maximizing all the availability of funding that's going to be available for families? Or otherwise.
Really good, Kelly. Yeah, and part of the unknowns, right, we don't know if we have collective shared vision around some of this. And I think that it's going to be the responsibility of the local coordinating organization to help bring some of that together. At least that's the way I understand the LCOs to be functioning. So right now, I don't have any answers.
Does
for
their
you, and
grant require them to do like a facilitation of stakeholders at all?
I'm not sure. I have to check, but I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
Well, that's good then. Okay, thanks.
But I'll have to double check on that for you. I'm not 100% certain.
Yeah, we want this to be a success, right? The goal is that more children can take advantage of pre-K than otherwise could have, or families can pay less than what they're currently paying in childcare, who may already have their kids enrolled. So I don't know. I'll look to you. Feel free to lean on me, or I don't know how the board's feeling for any help.
Thank you so much for that, because I have a sense that I will be leaning into this a little bit as we start to understand a little bit more of what's happening. I think right now the reason there's some of the kind of, dare I call it backlash or kind of, just uncertainty is because it's happening so quickly and there's so much about it that's unknown. And to address the part that you asked, Kelly, they do plan in the next, I don't know if it's 2 to 3 or 3 to 5 years to consider a rulemaking authority. It's really in the beginning to get it up and running. I think that it's really the intention that they wouldn't be able to do it with an authority because of how many rules and things need to be created in order to make this successful.
Okay, I'm kind of seeing this as, since the OEC is a new baby, we're going through delivering that baby, the labor pains, and now we're going to be going through growing pains as it gets up and running. So I think we just need to keep an eye on it, stay tuned, and jump in to make sure that as they grow this program, they're not forgetting about the needs that come right down to the local and regional and county levels. So, well, like Kelly said, if you need our help, let us know. And if something pops up, you just think we might be interested, we can always, you can always get in touch with us. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for that. And we will be probably reporting on this at each of our quarterly updates to not only keep ourselves up to date on it, but to keep you all as well,
Great.
the Board of Social Services.
Thank you.
Okay, lastly, the last thing on our agenda today is to talk about the Colorado Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing, HCPF. So if you don't know what the Colorado Healthcare Policy and Financing is, they're responsible for administering all of our Medicaid programs for the state of Colorado. So there have been some, there's been some growing tension here as well with HCPF. And I'm going to speak to some of these issues now. So there's really currently 3 issues that we think we're facing that's increasing some of this kind of adversarial relationship between local county human services and HCPF organization. So in 2021, there was a federal audit. And the outcomes really led to a focus on county compliance. HCPF is taking more responsibility now for their role in state supervision, which you all probably already know about. But how that looks to us is it's happening with some pretty rapid rule changes, rigorous audits. I think we've already had like 4 this year, 3 or 4 this year, and new interpretations of some of the rules. So what that means, or how that looks for us in the work, and I'll let Sam speak to this a bit as well, is that it's increased the workload for our economic assistance and our adult and family services departments with a number of new audits, new policies and procedures that are required by rule changes, really with some inconsistent direction and reporting from HCPF. Sam, was there anything that you wanted to add to that piece?
Yeah, I think when we talk about this, looking at kind of where this is coming from is important. And the state's under a lot of pressure because of some of these issues that they're seeing with accuracy as well as timeliness, mostly around accuracy. and the federal government puts them under pressure around this. And because it's the state supervision, they really, their only ability to make change is to try to implement these new rules. And I think the language we started to hear 18 months ago, maybe 2 years ago, was that, there may be sanctions coming down, and these can be, the wording at the time was there's a law that prevented the sanctions from being passed on to the counties, and HCBUF was working to change that. So I think that's our concern sometimes when we start to see this push towards all of these new implemented rules and regulations and audit procedures and things like that is, what's the end goal here? Are we going to start to see some support to help these issues be resolved, or is this, just kind of setting the stage? Caused an issue maybe with this relationship here, is a lot of it feels punitive, more so than productive. But we're hoping that we continue to work with them to get the support we need to get our accuracy on track. One of the issues we run into around the accuracy issues is that the federal government audits cases in a different way than the state does. And that's something that I know that HCBUF's been struggling with, is that we look at these cases based on our rules and we say, well, this percentage has some issues with it. Whereas the feds look at it in a different way. So we have a hard time making these two sets of audits line up with each other. The other issue is that there's really two kinds of errors that are looked at our end, but not so much at the federal end, and is that we look at errors that actually cause eligibility issues, meaning did it impact our customer negatively or incorrectly in a positive way? Maybe they received coverage when they shouldn't have. And then there's also just procedural errors, meaning was there something on the case that wasn't correct, but still technically is an error, but it didn't impact the customer's eligibility. So, that's what's kind of complicating this whole thing. Sorry to ramble on, but.
Okay, Kelly has a comment.
No, I guess I don't fully understand. What's the big picture problem that they're trying to solve?
Right now, the big picture problem is at the error rate. That's what the federal, FNS, not FNS, that's Food Nutrition Services. Federal Medicare, CMS, Medicare Services, is concerned about the error rate. Colorado, based on their audits, has one of the highest error rates in the country. Like I said, that's where there's a lot of this confusion around, how are error rates calculated at the federal versus state level, and also that difference between, do these errors actually impact the customer, or at the end of the day, are these errors really procedural? There's also the complication with the pandemic and how folks have now been what they're called locked in, because that coverage is continuous through the public health emergency. And how is that causing confusion within our caseload, and also how are the cases being worked differently? Throughout the pandemic, the rules and regulations and really workarounds have changed, quite frequently. So caseworkers and eligibility staff who are managing these cases have been told different things at different times, and the way that information trickles down, it can be hard to say, from one day to another, working a case the same way could either be correct or incorrect. So there's a lot going on. I don't think anyone would disagree that, the error rate's higher than we'd like to see. But I think there's a bit more pressure maybe than usual on HCBUF to bring this down and bring it down quickly.
Well, I don't know if it's helpful. I did the Peace Corps with the Deputy Medicaid Director at HCBUF. And we'd be happy to organize a conversation with us if that's helpful.
Yeah, it might
Let me know.
be something active with Northwest directors or with the Northwest and the Southwest, because we're really inviting them into a lot of the conversations, HCBUF leadership. We invite them to our Northwest directors meetings every month to kind of chip away at some of these issues and just keep talking through how we can best support one another. Thank you for that, Kelly.
Yeah, no problem.
It sounds to me like the error is between the feds and the state, not with us, they're not with the, the people who administer the programs within the state, and the error is one organization, one level is asking for this kind of report, and the other one's asking for this, and there's an error on how they connect. So it's too bad they can't look at the bigger picture and say, maybe if we had one reporting system, that in itself would help to reduce the errors. But wishful thinking to have the government entities work together, but doesn't mean we can't stop fighting that fight. And Kelly might be able to help us
Or
in that.
performance incentives like they do in other types of programs.
Yeah.
Anyway, if I can be helpful, I'm happy to be.
Okay, so I'm seeing a trend in these 4 items that you just presented to us, and that there's a lot going on, and it almost feels like the state is picking on human services these days. And I don't know if it's a funding issue because they're trying to fund so many other programs across the board within the state that, they've been looking for ways to save money in some areas so they can spend it in others. And I kind of feel like human services might be getting caught in the middle of some of that. So let's keep an eye on it, I think. And because the worst case scenario is those unintended consequences and the funding that we might have to be looking at in the future that's coming out of our own pocket. So I think that's important, because these are all important services for diverse demographics in our community. All right, Lindsay.
Thank you, Patty. I think you summarized that really nicely.
We worked on that, didn't we?
It's one of the reasons we brought it to you all today as well, is so that you're on the same page as us, that you understand locally what's happening, and that you're equipped with that information and conversations that you all are having, and that we can keep thinking together on how we can advocate for our local services and programs that do reach some of the individuals in our community who really need it the most.
Great.
So Patty, you did a great job. The reason I was laughing is because everything you've said today I'm like, oh, I must be on the right track because Patty is almost repeating some of the questions that some of the things. So it's giving me great confidence. I appreciate that, Patty.
No, thank you.
Yep, that was all that we had to present today. Are there any other questions or comments or things that you all would like to share? I have one more thing that's like non-related, but.
Do I have anything from the board on what we've discussed and seen so far, or can we give Lindsay some free rein here? Looks like it's yours.
Okay, so one question that we had today was the value of being in person, and we just wanted to ask the board today if you would prefer for us to come in person, or if you would prefer for us to continue to be on Zoom in this capacity. Is there something that fits better for the board? Because we had a staff meeting today and we all said, well, I don't know. Let's ask the board today.
Well, I think, and I'm speaking for myself here, that at one of these meetings, it would be nice to have you here with us just because we haven't seen you in the same room. That doesn't mean that we can't continue to do the Zoom meetings with you at, every quarter, but maybe depending upon your schedules at our next quarterly meeting, we would love to see your smiling faces up close and personal. Well, across the table anyway. I don't know how the rest of the board would feel about that, but I think it would be nice. Kelly?
I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice. Maybe the board can host you guys all for a lunch or something, because I don't want to, I know that this can be really helpful to juggle families and other, other things that you all have going on in your lives to be able to attend by Zoom. So I'm flexible with what will work for you. And if you guys find that you have a date you can all coalesce around, then wonderful.
And you can bring children and dogs and cats, and we're open, We can just keep the door closed and let it all go here in the room. Greg, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this comes up probably at every board meeting I've gone to in the last couple of weeks. People are trying to figure out what's the perfect balance. And what the conclusion that I'm seeing is that while we definitely want to meet in person at some point, maybe there's a minimum number of times per year or special times like retreats or whatever, where we definitely meet in person. There's no question about it. But then there's also the possibility through regular meetings to do Zoom. Because what I've been seeing is that people who don't who really don't like Zooming and really insist on in-person meetings often aren't there. You know, they're not there and they don't participate, or they're on Zoom even though they don't like being on Zoom. So it's kind of becoming a convenience and a necessary convenience at times. But I have become to realize how valuable it is to be in person, you know, at least part of the time. So maybe we should make a goal, you know, to do it at least once a year, or maybe 2 out of 4 meetings in person, and maybe that's the way to find that balance. Thanks. The nice thing also is you get more attendance. You get the alternates come, and others will come who couldn't have. So, you know, we are able to fill out attendance by having the Zoom option.
So Lindsay, why don't you and I get in touch before the next quarterly, and we'll see what's going on in lives and see what we can come up with. I'd be more than happy to help you with that.
That sounds great. Thank you. And I love your answers because we grab the same things.
Well, let me turn it around to your staff. Do you guys want to come see us at some point in the future? Or are you comfortable seeing us from afar? Oh, Sam's always in for coming in. Matt?
Oh, I'm up for it, yes. I'd love to come in and be in person, for sure.
And Audrey,
Especially if there's
we'd love
a
to see
cookout or
Audrey
something.
here. Okay, is that wrap up?
Nice to see you all in person, that's for sure.
I know, it'd be nice. So is that it, Lindsay? Can we wrap? Thank you. So I need
That's
a
a wrap.
motion.
Yep.
I need a motion to adjourn as the boss.
So moved.
So moved.
I got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion
Aye.
passes. Thank you very much. And I see Mr. Peacock. Bye, Matt. Mr. Peacock is here with us. And
Thank you all.
thank
No, I should have said, if you had all been here in person, you could see my "What Would Dolly Do" T-shirt.
She has a "What Would Dolly Do" T-shirt on today, and we're trying to decide what Dolly would do, and we haven't quite figured it out yet. But Dolly is not zooming in with us, or well, she's kind of here in person. All right, thank you guys. So, Mr. Peacock, what would you like us to see if we can cover now?
Well, Patty, that is of course at the discretion of the chair, but we could jump into future agendas and probably see if there's any board open discussion, whatever your pleasure is, or you can take a really long break.
No, let's move along because I got a really lot to do to catch a plane tomorrow. Francie,
I
please.
wanted to ask John if we are going to do the Colorado counties discussion. Are they going to be here?
John, I think is Colorado County's joining us today at 4:15.
Yes, they are. We've got the director as well as the president joining us.
So
today
we're
to
not. There's
respond.
no way we're getting out of here early today because we'll have to.
We could, I could certainly try and contact Charlotte and see if both those individuals are available sooner. That may be a little short notice.
Yeah, well, let's move along here and see how we do. And you know, I'm not going to wait till 3:30 to ask. So, but it's only a little before 2, so we've got some time. So let's go to future agendas. Does the board have any issues for future agendas? John, we do have something that's under open discussion, which we can put under our future agendas. That's the Emma Road Historic Preservation Site visit. And I know that Charlotte sent us out some potential dates of conflict.
She did today?
No, we need to schedule it. But Charlotte said, no, she sent it to me.
Oh.
Kelly's gonna be out of town the week of June 7th, right? That week, Kelly?
Yeah, I might be here the Monday, Tuesday, 6th, 7th.
Okay. And then we have,
I will have kids, so I'll have to bring kids
the kids will love it.
on the site visit.
Does the board have any preference in what days they'd like to do this?
I'm deferring to Steve and Francie, who I felt like,
Yeah.
From,
Yeah,
are you
Francie?
talking about doing on a day that's not a meeting day?
Yeah, we're not doing it on a meeting day, because I would take up our whole meeting day.
Let me just check the calendar here.
Leslie Lamont did tell me it's It's a pretty easy site to visit. You
Yeah,
can pretty
it's
much
very
stand
easy.
on the road and see most of it, but
True.
I'm thinking maybe we can look at June 6th. It's a Monday.
That works for me. Or the 10th, or the 3rd, which is a Friday.
How does the board feel about the 6th, Monday the 6th? Steve?
That works for me. And don't we have to have this done by June 8th?
I have no
When
idea.
I think we were having this continuation maybe on, let's see, let's look on the future agendas.
We could always move it if we didn't have the site visit yet.
But if we do it before
We
June
really
8th, we've
like
got
this.
that covered. June 6th would be good.
Works for me.
Greg?
I could do the 6th, but I have to be done and back where I can get on a core CEO final interview meeting by 11:15. So I could do it in the morning before 11:15, or I could do it in the afternoon after 1:45.
Well, I think the site visit would probably take us a half an hour, 45 minutes.
Right.
So we could do it at 9.
So we want to do it at
Yeah.
9 o'clock on the 6th, if staff can arrange that? All right, John,
about-
I'm putting
yeah.
it down.
9 or 10?
How about 9:30?
Okay. I'm putting it on my calendar.
Okay, and I'll have staff get back to us. John, if you could follow up with that?
And did you say 9 or 9:30? I heard both there.
Well, let's see what works for staff. 9:30 I think would be better, but if staff can do it at 9, we'll do it at 9. We'll give them some flexibility. We just need to make sure the board knows and we have travel arrangements set up or whatever we need. Okay, and then the solid waste tour. This is for the soft opening, I believe, of the Jack Aspen Mercantile.
That would be the mother load, mercantile.
Hey, what was the address on the Emma Road while you're still,
I don't
do you
know.
have that address? No? Okay.
I don't have that off the top.
right
We'll get that.
after
Well,
Horseshoe.
I'll wait to hear.
306, or he wants this.
It's right after Horseshoe.
No, he wants the specific.
306.
I don't know, I just kind of picked that. It sounded like a good day, Greg.
Oh, shoot,
I'm
what
gonna
was
get
my
the
question?
address.
I had another question.
All right.
I can ditch my kids. I'm gonna ride my bike.
What was it?
Okay.
Oh, yes, I know what it was. It was, John, it was about the COVID presentation thing. So, and originally it looked like we were just going to be attending, but now you're thinking that we might be participating in some way?
That's news to
So-
me.
Well, that's what you said at the last meeting when you asked him.
Just to be clear, what this is it is what might be called a hot wash. And so it's an opportunity for all those that were involved in the response. And this was a broad community response. So we've got a lot of players at the table. It's an opportunity to talk about what went well, what didn't go so well, what are our learnings, and then trying to, tee up that information so that we can rethink our processes for future. Should we have knock on wood, we don't have another pandemic, but we will have another event that we'll have to respond to. So this is kind of what you call a hot wash. And so the board is not expected to make a specific presentation or such, but the board, you provided a lot of leadership, you provided a lot of thought through the COVID response. Some things you probably felt went well, some things you're probably like, why did that happen that way? And so as the conversation goes on, we'll be looking for your input as well as other entities, but it's not like the board needs to be prepared for a specific discussion. No one is preparing really a presentation per se or anything like that. We have a facilitator who's going to walk us through the hot wash process. The results of that conversation then will get reported back to the board and in our organization so we can consider those in future plans.
So we're just a presence in the room kind of a thing.
Yeah, and you may feel compelled to offer insight, perspective, feeling that you had during all of this to have included in that broader document. And you'll be welcome to do so, as will everyone else that's attending.
Okay.
So the reason I was asking is that is the Wolf meetings, and so I'm just wondering, should I be late for the Wolf meetings and stay here for that?
Well, we have a regular meeting that day, a significant regular meeting that day that starts at noon.
Yeah, I won't be there.
Yeah, Francie, I think if
I could
you
be.
feel
It's really important.
that, whoops, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I think if you feel that you've got some unique observations you want to be sure are shared about the COVID response, you can either ask one of your peers to share it, or you can kind of wait for the overall debrief and kind of what would we do differently next time, which is going to be a future discussion. This is really information gathering, not a presentation of a report or anything like that. So I don't know how to tell you how to do that math, Francie, but
Yeah, it's up to you. I'd rather have you for the regular meeting, but since you can't do that
Well,
too,
I
so-
might be able to. Let me just.
Yeah.
What's on the regular meeting that day?
a lot. The very end, I think, is on that day. No, it's on the 8th, isn't it? And then you'll be gone. Yeah.
Hey, Patty.
Yes,
Can
Greg?
I just wanted to ask, just John, I'm still a little kind of in the woods about the hot wash. So what I'm wondering is who's presenting and whose information are they presenting, and have they talked to people in advance? Is it only the IMT? I was thinking maybe it's an IMT thing because it sounds like they're sort of, party, with a hot wash. But the Board of Health wasn't even on the mailing list for this until we had our retreat a couple days ago. And so a lot of people who feel that they played a pretty big role in this haven't even been contacted. So that explains the feeling of confusion around this. It's like, I don't know what this is about and who's going to be presenting to me. And if they're asking questions of me, they're not going to do it in a large room full of people, are they? It'd just be nice to know what's going on and who's doing it and who's running this. There's a moderator, but who have they been talking to? And all those questions do come up. And I'm not asking to play any larger role in it than I currently have, which I'd say is only as a listener. But I'm just wondering on behalf of the Board of Health and maybe this board as well.
So, I don't know how to explain this other than this is initial information gathering. And so again, this is not information that's been gathered that's being presented back. Right now, we have representatives that have been invited from entities that have been involved in the response to do kind of that initial what went well, what didn't. That will be brought back. And so I have a feeling the board might be more interested. You all need to make a determination where you want to be involved in that discussion. I have a feeling the report out, part of what I think you're interested in, Greg, is kind of the report out and subsequent decision making. That's not where we are right now. We're gathering folks. We have an organization called Blue Square. I believe it's called Blue Square. They've facilitated a number of our tabletop exercises for emergency response and kind of hot wash after that. And so this is really gathering some of that, gathering everyone together in that preliminary data gathering exercise.
And everyone being...
It's going to be representatives from really the organizations. It's probably mostly going to be staff at this point that was involved, and then bringing those observations and such back to bodies. So,
Is Aspen
but you
gonna
all
be
have
there?
expressed an interest in being at that and part of the discussion, which I think is perfectly appropriate and great.
Will Aspen be there?
Thanks.
Yeah, there will be representatives from really, we had participation from all the municipalities, number of nonprofits and private sector organizations at various points in the response, especially through, as Greg said, the IMT, but also the what you call EOC, Emergency Operations Center functions, which are really a broader set of community response, including municipalities, nonprofits, other governmental entities.
So I just want to, it's my understanding, if I remember correctly, that the BOCC was interested in having kind of a debrief, you know, about what went well, what didn't go so well. And so I think, and I know that was planned anyway. And so, John, and I've already expressed this to you, I was a little concerned that it was planned without the BOCC really even knowing it was being planned, and then on a day when we can't be there the whole day, and we're having it in a big venue, so you would think there's going to be a lot of people at both sessions, which means it's a significant community effort, and I would have preferred if the BOCC could have had a presence at both sessions to hear from the people that are there, so they knew that we are interested and concerned, but apparently that's not going to happen, so. And the fact that Board of Health, I really share Greg's concern about that. I mean, for them to not have been one of the top groups on the list. So it is what it is now. So the board can either decide to be there at 9 o'clock and leave at 11. And then, so we can be back here at noon for our regular meeting, because that's the day we have the sheriff's office doing an awards presentation, and we have the celebration of the child for the month of the child. The young child, and we'll have a room full of young children. We've already talked to them about waiting outside for us to get here and get going. So I think we'll just have to see how it goes, and then the information will come back to the board. And hopefully, John, you and I can meet, and we can set up when we're going to do that, so we know when it's on the board's agenda, so we can try to make sure we have all members of the Board of Commissioners here for that information sharing. So, I mean, I think things could have gone a little different. That's not how it is now, so we have to work with the direction in which it's going. Francie?
So on the 25th, I'm still working on whether or not I'll just go in the evening, or I don't know.
Well, and it sounds like
It
it's going to
says
come back to us anyway.
TDR, related to TDR sending sites, first reading. Do you know what that is, John?
It is, that is going to be some of the proposed code language, and background on how sending sites either are or not currently defined. I think the board wanted some conversation around that, so
But
we're trying to bring some.
it's an ordinance, isn't it? Isn't it a change?
It's adopting amendments to the 2006 Pickens County Land Use Code.
So I think we're having our discussion at the meeting to adopt a change. It's at the regular meeting, John, not at the work session on the 24th.
Oh.
I'm looking at the 25th,
Yep.
right near the end of the meeting.
It's an item we've,
Item-
Number 14.
Item 12. 12?
No, 14
it's an item we've, I think, continued from other meetings.
from May 11th, which I don't even remember talking about it last
I
week.
think this is one of the staff code amendments, code
Yeah.
cleanups.
But John's saying it's it's a discussion with the code amendment in front of us, so.
I'm not sure that's what that is. I don't think this is tied to the GMQS conversation.
No, it's not.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to get hold of Cindy. But Francie, why don't we may want to bring some of these offline for you to make that decision.
Okay.
Also, Francie, that's a first reading, so there will be a second reading on that item. So you'd get another bite at the apple if you can't be there for that
Yeah.
first reading.
We can get more clarification for you,
Okay.
Francie. I started out and it got diverted from my Aspen, the Mercantile, Motherlode Mercantile site visit. I mean, it's not a site visit, it's the soft opening. Remember, John, it's on our agenda for open discussion.
Yeah, so it's the soft opening, and I think there's not a specific event. I think when the board, at least some of the board members heard that, they may have been thinking kind of like almost a ribbon cutting or a community event activity, but it's a soft opening, which is almost lightly advertised, trying to get our feet under us in the process opening. And there's an invitation for board members, of course, to come out during the soft opening. Patty, I think one of the things you wanted to talk to the board about is, would it make sense for board members to coordinate a time to be there to kind of interact with staff and tour the facility at the same time? Is that right?
Well, I didn't know what the board wanted to do, but that would be great. But because the time frame was like 7 a.m. to 6 or something, and I didn't think that staff wanted us there from 7 a.m. till 6. So either we can just notice it, John, as that day, and then the three of us show up at the same time, or if the board would like to do something at a certain time, that's why I put it on here for discussion, so we had a clear path ahead of us. And what day is that, John? Do you remember? There was something in the
Friday,
new.
June 3rd.
Is it June 3rd?
And it's June 3rd, yeah. And yeah, so the idea was just if board members were interested. So the real question is, do you want to show up collectively and have a tour and ask questions together? And then in which case we definitely need to post it.
What day is it again?
It's Friday the 3rd of June.
Thank you.
I was just going to go and take my single stream while I'm going. It's a dump run, as we call it at home, euphemistically called a dump run. Just whenever I can get that together after irrigating and getting the recycling in the car. It's harder to predict when I would show up, but I just thought I would go and pretend I'm a customer looking at the goods and talk to the staff when I'm there was what I was going to do.
So John, why don't we just post it that day, like it is, from 7 a.m. on, just in case there's 3 members of the board that show up at one time, and then just leap it over to the board. If anybody wants to go, they can go at their leisure. If they want to do a dump run, or if they want to go hang out all day at the landfill. So why don't we just do that and leave that kind of open for board to decide, and so if 3 of us are there, we've noticed it. Okay? All right. So those 2 items are off. Any other future agendas or open discussion? Kelly has something here.
Oh.
Yeah, I have a couple of things. One, I was going to ask Francie if she would be willing to present the wolf conversation to us.
Give us an update? No. Put it on an agenda, give you some time.
Yes, we're going to be done in August, but we're supposed to keep September and October open for one more meeting. I don't know whether that's going to change because the director of CPW got in trouble, and so things got a little bit crazy at CPW. But
Do you want to
I
bring
could-
it
I
back?
could do it anytime.
I just don't know anything. I haven't been following it at all. So
yeah,
to have some
I could do it anytime. Let me ask
presentation
at
of
the
what's
next
going
meeting.
on.
I've been asking when we're going to decide where are they going to be introduced, and it seems to me that once we make that decision, that will be of prime interest to everybody. But I could present where we are up until now anytime.
Well, maybe I don't know if the board wants to be part of that decision before that decision's made. I mean, to give you input to represent us.
We can do that.
So, why don't we look towards the end of June or July, and we'll set some time up.
Sounds good.
How's that, Kelly? Yeah, that works. Okay, got it, John? We'll put that on our future list.
I have 2 more things.
Okay, you've got the floor.
And then I'm wondering, John, has there been any conversation with APSHA about coming to present to the board and getting time to do that?
Still working on that. I've got a meeting set up with Matthew.
Okay.
believe it's later this week, actually. We're going to talk about it then.
Okay, and then finally, I wanted to sort of check in on this topic that kind of comes and goes related to an agricultural advisory board of sorts. And I know we've brought it up at different times over the past 2 years, and I don't know if there's been any other conversations about that, or if we need to schedule time to figure out what as a board we might want to see and all that.
Yeah, I think we need a lot more. I think all we've heard is agricultural board, so maybe we need, I don't even know really what the board's looking for at this point. In the past, we had one that really just looked at land use applications, and that one came apart, and I think you're looking at maybe a community advisory board, but it's not clear to me how you want to use that. So or even which department may be appropriate to even start looking at that. And so perhaps we should schedule a work session.
Gotcha.
Because that has not been clear, I think, to us what the board really wants there.
Yeah, John, let's see if we can't set
there
up some work
support?
session time, and then, no, Francie, but,
This
and then,
is about this.
okay, but just a sec, but I also want to just say that we have, I think we have a new member of Open Space and Trails who's kind of our ag person now, so that'd be a good opportunity for us to meet that new staff member also.
I just want to make sure there's board support for that. I feel like there has been in the past, but that would help staff to.
I think there's definitely support
Okay.
for talking about it. We'll,
Okay.
we'll see if the board supports the direction or not. Francie, you have,
Yeah,
Yeah, I wanted to say that now that we have somebody on Open Space and Trails who is their ag go-to guy, I wonder if we should give it a little time to see if that's helpful to us when we have ag decisions, because they're usually around open space and trails. So that's one thing I was going to say. And the agricultural board that we had before, or whatever it was called, I thought that was strictly about building use, the one that we used to have. I don't think it had anything to do with crops or leases or anything. It wasn't land use, it was buildings only, I
it was
think.
how to design a barn 101.
So I,
that-
yeah.
That was my understanding.
That's correct. I think it might be helpful even in setting up a work session to even if we have a few minutes, understand a little bit what each of you is thinking with an agricultural advisory board, because, I don't know if it's informed leasing. We've talked about open space and trails, which has specific interactions, for example, around leasing. I know from time to time we come up into questions regarding is something an agricultural use or not an agricultural use during land use conversations, which is where that's sat before. And previously, I think it was a concern, frankly, about was a barn a party barn or was it actually for agricultural use? And that's how that committee was getting used. Or is there something else that the board is interested in? And so I think if I understood a little bit more what the board was interested in getting advice on, may even help what departments would participate in a work session.
Right, and my initial interest was to understand the landscape of water rights and,
Water.
Water use.
Steve has his hand up too.
I would include Ellen Sassano in the discussion. I served on an agricultural advisory board for Pitkin County that was kind of an ad hoc thing quite a few years ago, several decades ago. I don't even remember when. And I think we were charged with coming up with some ideas about something. I don't know if I don't even remember now exactly what it was, but Ellen was the staff person who was leading that effort. And I could see an agricultural advisory board advising on agricultural issues on open space lands, agricultural issues on land use applications, food security issues regarding Health and Human Services Department things, renewable energy and climate mitigation efforts of the county with regards to agricultural practices that we could be promoting. So, that's touching on a lot of different county departments actually. And so I see a more broad ranging committee that could advise on a broad number of subjects to the county.
Okay, John, so we'll touch base and talk with Ellen maybe and with Gary and see what we might be able to do and just bring it back for a broader discussion, and the board decides we want to go establish an official, quote unquote, ag advisory board, we can take it to the next step. But we have been talking about it for a while, and so before we have other issues with leases, et cetera, coming up, it'd be nice to have the discussion.
Hey, Patty.
Yes.
If I could briefly, what I just heard was such a diverse array of topics. I wonder if any single board could do it. And I also wonder if that's just another level of redundancy, and, how necessary is it? Can't open space make those decisions regarding leasing based on the developing criteria? I appreciate Kelly's questions about water, but is that going to be a board that we entrust, an advisory board that we entrust to talk about what, water use? I'm just wondering if the mechanisms are already in place, and is this going to make things easier or more difficult, or just add more layers of complexity? I don't quite get a feel for it yet, but I'd love to have the conversation offline with everyone, because I think I've advocated for this in the past, but right now it sounds like such a broad palette of reasons. I want to make sure it's something a single board could do.
Greg, that's perfect for part of the discussion. We'll let you lead the discussion. How's that? So, John, we'll just look at some, and we'll look at some time. But you have to be in the room to do it. You can't do it from home. You got to be here. So, John, we'll just talk about some time. So I've got it on my list. Okay. All right. Any other open discussions, future agendas for the board? John, please.
Thanks, Patty. So just a couple things. We'll start with the fun one. We do have an employee picnic that we're planning for July 28th. So it's a little ways out. We are planning on doing that at the Public Works facility. A little bit easier access and plenty of space. So hopefully that gives folks enough forewarning there. So we'll be getting more details out, but just wanted to make sure board was aware of that. And that is definitely something we're going to need to bring forward some of the results from our employee listening sessions to the board. We've been summarizing those, and we're going to have some recommendations coming out of those for the board. But this was definitely among the list of things, those in-person gatherings that give us a chance to reconnect.
So you do know that, wait, John, you do know that if it's the 28th of July, when's your birthday, Kelly?
The 17th.
And
When's
mine's
yours, Patty?
Mine's the 31st, John.
Well, potentially we'll have a cake.
And Greg and Steve and Francie are cooking it because it's Kelly's and my birthday.
The employee picnic was on my birthday the first year.
Oh, yeah, it was?
I
Really?
in office, and oh my God, it was so embarrassing. It said happy birthday. It was this huge cake that said happy birthday, Kelly. that I cut and then served to everybody.
We could do that again.
Part, Kelly?
Yeah.
That Pepsi, right?
Yeah.
I remember
Like
that.
2
It
weeks
was-
after having allergies.
Wasn't it over?
I've
Was it over
heard
at
if
Coke?
people
It was
forget
a
about my
Pepsi.
Oh, was it
birthday.
Pepsi? What's that, Francie?
I prefer when people forget about my birthday.
No, I like birthdays. All right, John, what else?
Yeah, and then Patty, you had talked about, and I don't think we need to, come to any conclusions on this today, but starting up our meetings with our neighboring jurisdictions
Oh, yeah.
again, like Lake County, Eagle, Garfield. Gunnison usually wants a really specific topic. But I would like to add a future agendas, but to kind of put a bug in the board's ear, I think it would be good for us to be a little strategic and think about what topics we have coming up with the entities so that maybe we can time those meetings a little bit. So for example, we're in discussions with the Forest Service and Eagle County about potentially acquiring some of the Forest Service land around Crown Mountain Park right now. That time frame is probably, we're going to know a lot more probably in the August, September time frame. So maybe that's a good time to set up a meeting with Eagle County where we have those types of pending decisions. You all may be aware of other types of issues that are forthcoming that would be timely. And so I thought it might be good for us to think a little strategically about what issues might be coming up, and then we can maybe time those meetings appropriately and tell the entities some of the topics that we're anticipating.
So John, yeah, I started kind of making a list. Can we maybe send out an email to the board, BOCC, and say, here's the jurisdictions we've met with in the past. Do you have any topics of interest? And then we can start to focus it down to a time frame, or, maybe Basalt may want to come to the meeting with Eagle County if we're going to talk about the tree farm.
Right.
Those kind of things. So let's look at that, and then that'll also keep the board, so the board knows that we really do want to get that information back to, and then we can reach out, once we kind of have an idea, we can reach out to the individual mayors or chairmans or county managers and say, here's some topics we want to discuss with Eagle County about this, and this. What's a good time frame for you? And see if we can't work it out. Because in the past, those were always great meetings, and we have not done that. Even prior to the pandemic, we weren't doing it on a regular basis. And I think it's worth reaching out. Steve?
So another open discussion item.
Wait, let me make sure this one's done.
If you want.
Yeah, is
Okay.
everybody okay with that? We'll send out a little email and get your minds thinking about it, and then
Sure.
John and I can sit down and see what we can focus on. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Steve. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's okay. So Francie and I went to Redstone on Saturday and there was a presentation by the Carbondale Fire Department there in Redstone. What they were doing mainly is soliciting new volunteers for the fire department, both as volunteer firefighters and as emergency EMRs, emergency medical responders. They have in their fire station there, they have 2 apartments, both of which one occupied by a paid staff person and one occupied by a volunteer, but they are really shorthanded for any sort of fire response in Redstone. When they had the fire there by the Redstone campground last week, it was citizens basically going by with a guy had a bunch of buckets in his truck and he started hauling water to the fire, and they put the fire out with a bucket brigade next to a downed power line. The fire truck from Redstone didn't even make it there. The one from Carbondale, it took 21 minutes or something for them to get there after the fire call came in. So they're really in need of volunteers. There were some people there who expressed interest, but I mean, a lot of them were older people. There were a few young people who might make better long-term volunteer firefighters, but it was an interesting discussion. They really were appreciative that Francie and I were there as Picken County commissioners to show up in Redstone for an event. So that effort is going on, just so you're aware.
So Steve, did anybody bring up anything about maybe they should require people who are renting short-term rentals to have a background in firefighting or emergency response?
Well, we didn't talk, I mean, I did talk about
Steve, I was just
short-term
kidding.
rentals.
I was just
No, with, like Bob McCormick was there, so you know, and so a lot of the people who were at our commissioner meeting were there actually. There was a little bit of mention of short-term rentals, but the thought crossed my mind, it is, you know, that's one of the issues. They're having trouble getting volunteers to run their parade and all sorts of things. So it doesn't surprise me they're having trouble getting volunteer firefighters also.
And you know, speaking of that, they one of the comments during the short-term rental was that they wanted the Board of Commissioners to come to Redstone because they didn't think we'd ever been there. And I don't know, I was thinking about the 4th of July parade this year, but you know, whenever I get a chance and go up that way, you got to swing by Redstone. Redstone's a place not to be missed by any of us. So
Well, I was at this very same meeting last year about
The fire?
Yes.
yeah, and I think it's great the two of you went up there. Kelly, I think, was at I was going to say Daffodil Days, Dandelion Days.
At our Wild and Scenic booth.
How did that go?
Really good. We got a lot of people that came by and signed our petition and
Oh, that's great.
picked up info and learned about the campaign.
Did you drink
and-
dandelion wine?
No, I did not.
I've never had that. Have you had that, Francie?
Have I ever had what?
Dandelion wine?
Heck no.
Oh, anybody,
my
any
mouth
old
itch.
Greg shaking his head, yes. We all used to make dandelion wine. Everybody, I think, local used to do that. We did go by Dandelion Days right at the beginning for a short while, but Molly said afterwards, we're never going to miss this again because it is almost akin to the Mountain Fair in the terms of size. The number of booths there was astonishing. It's like really a big event now, and we hadn't been in a few years.
But much less crowded, actually. Yeah, they had music all day and food and
No,
plant
perfect.
sales, lots of plant
Yeah,
sales.
I know they had lots of plants, so I
Yeah.
was going to try and get down there for that. Okay.
Yeah, so I am trying to rally a 4th of July float in the Redstone Parade, if any commissioners are interested, on the Wild and Scenic River effort.
We can get a raft.
Something.
You can get a raft and put it on a trailer.
That's a good
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, Kelly, we'll work on that. I think I
Cool.
know some people with rafts. Like a lot of people with rafts. We can have a raft and a dory.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Open discussion, future agendas? Anything
I
of
can just
interest?
follow up on that TDR issue if the board, it's really a pretty specific code amendment to prevent people from asking for a TDR on small slivers of forest service that may have been acquired through a mining claim process or such. We've had some of those come through, and we haven't necessarily had a code provision that would stop that. And so it's a fairly narrow code amendment, and it's to a pretty specific situation.
Yeah, I think that's what was kind of my understanding, now that you've caused me to think a little more, that it was, a lot of these things that are coming forward as far as code amendments are kind of cleaning up areas of the code rather
That's
than
correct.
making major changes, so.
Did he say Forest
Yeah.
Service in holdings? Is that what he was talking about?
Yeah, these
I
little
can't
slivers.
really understand
Yeah.
him very well today. It's kind
Little
of garbled.
slivers that are
Yeah.
out there.
I'm sorry, y'all having trouble hearing me? Am I not? Okay.
You got marbles in your mouth today, John.
Man, well, I did take a little spill down the stairs. I
Oh,
redid
no.
my calf. So just making sure.
John,
I know.
did you step on an eyelash curler, John? Was that a little eyelash curler?
This time.
He
I think it
did
was
that in the
cat,
past.
probably.
All right, it is,
Little 5-minute break.
okay, what, we're gonna take a break.
Okay, great.
We're gonna take a break. We will be back here. I think our next one's coming in at 2:45, so I'm gonna give us 10 minutes. Okay, guys?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Grassroots. Thanks, Skylar. We'll be back. One go. Welcome. Today is Tuesday, May the 17th, 2022. This is the Pickens County Board of County Commissioners work session. We are moving through our day, and we have invited guests here with us who are going to make us really intelligent on the county's investments. So we have the Pickens County Investment Advisors presentation, and I think we have Ann Driggers here to kick us off. Ann, you're in your car on your way to the airport? Are you there, Ann? We can see you. John, you want to help us out?
Yeah, let me see, and we should have two other reps. Are they in the room with you right now?
Yes, they are.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think Ann is having some problems with her audio. Ann, are you able to hear us yet?
Hi, yes, I'm
Yes,
sorry,
there
I
she is.
just logged on. Had a bit of a medical emergency, so I'm actually down in Grove Springs. Not for me, but that doesn't matter because Julie and Scott are here, and they are such great presenters, and they're here to present the update on our investments as of, I believe, the end of April, and also give us an economic update and hopefully tell us exactly what day the recession is.
An hour. We want the hour or two in that, Ann. So Ed, I hope everything's okay for you. Thank you for joining us. And I think you should be heading off on your trip here shortly. So we're glad you're going to be taking a vacation. So I'm going to turn it over to Julie. Scott, if you'd introduce yourself for the public, please.
Sure. My name is Scott Prickett. I'm co-CIO for Chandler Asset Management.
And I'm Julie Hughes. I'm a senior portfolio strategist with Chandler Asset Management.
And thank you. And as I said earlier, it's nice to be here in person.
Nice to have you.
And for those of you who are virtual, hopefully you can hear us and you have the materials we're going to present today. And as a reminder, we present both an economic update as well as the portfolio. And for today's presentation, I will do the brief economic update. And please stop us at any time if you have any questions, and then I'll turn it over to Julie to go through the portfolio. And I'll start on in your materials on page 3. You've got an economic update there, but I'll cover the highlights. One of the consistent themes right now in the marketplace is volatility. For most of the pandemic, it was a little bit like Groundhog Day, to be honest with you, coming in and also even doing numerous economic presentations, but it certainly isn't that now. And I'll get into some of the volatility of the fixed income markets as I go through this presentation. But that's certainly a given right now in the marketplace. Also, we're all reading about almost on a daily basis, even if you're not in the finance industry, about inflation, and we're seeing it on everything we buy and what's happening there. So as I go through this economic update, those are some of the prevailing themes, as well as the Fed and monetary policy with Powell even today. In fact, it was just an hour ago. So when we do these presentations, we usually have a lot of the Fed governors and certainly Powell's statements memorized, but since he just said it, I don't. And one thing he said is, I won't hesitate to tighten policy beyond neutral to achieve price stabilities, and we don't know with any confidence where quote-unquote neutral is, which is interesting. It's having watched the Fed for the better part of the past 35 years to come out and make a statement like that is pretty profound in my opinion. But and then the final item that I will be going over today that we're all again seeing in the headlines is growth, and per Ann's question, when the recession is going to be, do I have an exact answer for that? I do not. I will go through some information that will likely give at least an indication when that might occur a little bit later, is maybe on the gross domestic product page. So on the following page, page 4, is half of the Fed's mandate full employment, and we have a strong labor force. That's a given right now. There was 428,000 in non-farm payrolls at the last labor report, and then currently we're at 3.6% unemployment and 7% U6. And as a reminder, U6 are primarily those individuals that are working part-time but would like to work full-time. And that's the difference between 3.6% and 7%. One item we'll be watching closely is the participation rate. In the pre-pandemic, it was 63.4, and that's currently 62.2. So that represents a fair amount of workers, about 350,000 or so workers that have not come back into the employment picture yet. And earnings were up 5.5%. That's a great number, but it's not enough to keep up with inflation. So that's the problem. And then on the following page, speaking of inflation, we've got consumer price index on the left-hand side, personal consumption expenditures on the right. Most recently, the CPI was at 8.3%. The core was 6.2%, and then personal consumption expenditures 6.6%, and again, ex volatile food and energy at 5.2%. So well above the Fed's target of 2% plus. I frankly don't know when we will be close to that 2% number that the Fed would like to achieve, but based on what Powell said, again, just about an hour or two ago with a forum for the Wall Street Journal, I believe, they've really changed their focus, and definitely from when we were last presenting to you, and I was saying the word inflation is going to be transitory. Did we believe that? No. Did the Fed pound the desk and say that word for the better part of 2 years, they did, I think to their chagrin, because they've gone 180 degrees now, that the inflation certainly is not going to be transitory, as we're all seeing. And then on the following page, the ever important consumer. On the left-hand side, retail sales. In fact, we got a new number today, a pretty strong number, year over year at 8.2%. The base effects, so you can see that really high bar that is in the center of that chart. So when we get further along, it's going to be interesting to watch when the extremes and the volatility measures of the pandemic are out of some of these numbers, and we're measuring year-over-year numbers with a more stable environment. And then on the consumer confidence side, on the right-hand side, at 107.3, but you can see the trend line there is downward. Currently the consumer balance sheets are in pretty good shape, but it'll be interesting to see what consumer spending looks like as we move through the rest of the year. And then on the following page, economic activity, the leading economic indicators on the left-hand side at 0.3%, and the Chicago Fed National Activity Index at 0.43 for the 3-month average. Just as a reminder, there's a high correlation there with the CFNAI, Chicago Fed National Activity Index. When it's up to 0.7, it's been associated with inflation. And then when it's down to 0.7, negative, it's been associated with recession. So, I mentioned at the very beginning of this presentation, volatility. The market doesn't like uncertainty, and we certainly have uncertainty right now relative to, we've got high inflation, and many are calling for recession. So hopefully we don't get into, we might already be in a stagflationary environment.
I'm just going to see, does the board have any questions at this point?
I do.
Kelly?
Sure.
Historically, when inflation has surpassed wages and then come down, do those wages stay high?
Typically, yes. Typically, you have, because even talking to a couple of friends of mine with small businesses, they have had to increase the wages to get employees in the door.
Right.
And then a year from now, 2 years from now, they're not going to be able to go to those employees and say, oh, now that inflation is now back down to 2%, we're not going to honor what we brought you in at.
Mm-hmm.
So typically the new wages stay there, but then we'll see a deceleration of inflation, theoretically.
Yeah.
That's likely to happen.
I see that as a good thing.
Yes.
Yeah, but
Since wages have
Yes.
not kept up.
But the heart, yeah, that's helpful there, but then the other thing is when inflation comes down, wages stay here, the cost of goods. I mean, I can't see me being able to go to a local restaurant when they are starting to, supply and demand is resolving and they're getting product and the costs are going down for them. They're not gonna make it any less expensive for me to go to a local restaurant. But the good part is that those workers and those service providers in those restaurants will still be getting paid more money, but,
Not to mention the restaurant owners.
yeah, well, the restaurant owners.
Who, without them, we don't have restaurants.
Well, because she's a restaurant owner, that's why she said that, but, yeah, so I don't see that, but I also have a question, when you talk about the retail sales, what'd you say, 8.2%?
Yeah.
Well, is that due to, this is a question I have when we see our sales tax revenue, is it due to more purchasing, or is it due to the increased costs? I mean, everything costs more, so our,
That's a great question, and
Yeah.
it's both,
It's both.
actually. Yeah. And did you want to say something?
I was just going to say that that's a great point, because these numbers are not inflation adjusted. So that is, the
Yeah.
higher cost of everything is factored in.
okay.
Yep.
Because I'm wondering, because everybody goes, oh, look, we must be so busy because we made all this money in sales tax. And I'm like, that's because now to buy a pair of socks at Carl's Pharmacy cost you $25, and, a week ago it cost you 10.
And that's a great question. One of the items that surprised me on retail sales is e-commerce, especially with what we've just been through in the pandemic, and I thought it would be personally a lot higher. We reached a peak of approximately 16% of this total retail sales number, and for someone who does 100% of their buying online, I found that hard to believe, and also that it's coming down. It's-
16%, that's all?
Yeah.
I'm surprised by that
Yeah.
also.
Yeah, you thought
Exactly.
it would be higher.
Pretty sure I
Yeah.
do more than 16% of my shopping online, I'm
Yeah.
embarrassed to admit.
I just did some last night and I rarely do it. I had a weak moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, I would say it's fair to say I do almost 100% of mine online.
But
You're
not your
much weaker
groceries.
than I.
But no, if I, yeah,
Do
carve
they
out
count as
groceries.
retail? Are groceries part of retail?
Are groceries part of retail? Yeah. they
A
are.
what?
Yeah.
Food.
Groceries
Yeah.
part of retail.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then, let me see.
Sorry,
jumping ahead.
Kate.
That's all right, that's all
Okay,
right.
you totally-
Gasoline and autos are big chunk.
Yes, yeah, and that's very volatile.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
Yeah,
And,
and people don't tend to buy cars online, although some people do.
No, a lot of people are doing that now.
Yeah,
know.
and that is part of that number. Yeah, exactly. And it's growing.
I think we have another question here.
Oh, Steve? Sorry, I didn't thank you. I'm like,
So my only question, and maybe you'll answer it later in your presentation, but with the rate of inflation so high and our rate of return on our money sitting in the bank so low, should we be trying to spend our discretionary money as fast as possible on capital projects or whatever? I think, that sort of is, cost of construction is really high, but our money is losing value that's sitting there earning lower interest rates than the rate of inflation. So what is the fine line between, going ahead and trying to do projects now versus hanging on to the money and hopefully doing the projects later when maybe the cost of construction maybe will go down or maybe not, we don't know.
Well, that is a good question, and both at the end of the economic report as well as what Julie's going to cover, we'll be talking about that. And I can jump ahead if you like.
you can, you've got plenty of time.
Okay. Then yes, I will answer your question, but give us about 3 or 4 slides in which to focus on that.
Perfect.
And on page 8, the housing market has been a real surprise over the course of the past 3 years. I think everyone would agree with that. And the latest Case-Shiller composite number was 20.2% of an increase. In Denver, it was up 22.3%. There's been a little bit of a switch relative to what had been happening for years in terms of the cities that were leading that composite in terms of price appreciation. Primarily cities in the West, like San Francisco, LA, Seattle, Denver, were almost always at the top of that 20 city list. And now the top 3 are Phoenix, Tampa, and Miami. So that's a little bit of a change recently. And the bottom 3 in the most recent report, New York, Minneapolis, and Washington, D.C. And then on the next page, manufacturing, we have the ISM on the left-hand side, still expanding at 55.4. And we have industrial production on the right-hand side. Again, today we got a new number month over month, a nice increase of 1.1%. So the manufacturing environment will be interesting to watch more on a secular basis, I think. Certainly in the short term, we're going to get probably a slight slowdown, but it'll be interesting to see the effects of what's happening in Asia and more specifically China and the lockdowns that have occurred there, how it might affect more on a secular basis the manufacturing base here. And then on the following page, we have gross domestic product. You can see the number in the initial report for the first quarter of negative 1.4%. More importantly, looking forward, the consensus estimate is for 3% growth in the current quarter and 3.2% growth for 2022. And that's the big question mark. Again, we're hearing as much about the possibility of recession, slowing growth, as we are about the flip side of inflation and what I've been talking about. And it's a tough road for the Fed to head down. And the following page, page 11, addresses the Federal Reserve both with their balance sheet as well as their Fed funds rate, which they just increased to 75 basis points to 1%. We're expecting another 50 basis points at their meeting next month and then the following meeting in July. likely to be another 50 basis points. So the Fed is going to be aggressive and laser focused, if you will, on the inflation part of the equation versus growth. And growth might come at an expense to getting inflation under control. And we will see if that occurs. Rarely has the Fed engineered a quote-unquote soft landing. So if you analyze the shape of the curve, for example, a few weeks ago, we did see negative 2s to 10s. And historically, when you see that within 2 years, historically speaking, we've experienced a recession domestically. But also looking at the front end of the curve, the 3-month bill and the rate on that 3-month bill compared to the 10-year, we're still very steep. So that's telling us, at least historically, that we don't expect to see a recession, at least within the next 12 months. Do we think that there's likely to be a recession in the next 6 months? Our firm thinks it's unlikely, but we don't know for sure. But we think it is likely, and again, watching the Fed for the past 35 years, it's been difficult for them to engineer a soft landing. And do we expect that it's a strong possibility that we could see 2 negative quarters and define a recession over the course of the next, say, 18 months? Probably so. And then finally, bond yields. So one nice thing about what we're seeing, this will be part of the answer, Steve, is the higher rates in which we have to invest now. We've got a 2-year at a 271, a 5-year at a 297, and the 10 years at a 299. So has it hurt the total return, which Julie will go through? Yes, on the portfolio, but that's primarily the price of the holdings that you have. It's nice to have much higher yields in which to invest and get back to Ann and say, hey, Ann, we're investing now in a treasury that's yielding 2.5% versus calling her a year ago and saying, hey, we're investing in a treasury at 18 basis points. That's a nice and pleasant change. And we're going to have probably an environment that's attractive relative to yields for the remainder of the year, and likely into 2023. It's impossible to predict where yields are going. Some economists believe that we're reaching a peak in yields, and so taking advantage of this time relative to investing your portfolio is something we'll be trying to achieve. But I know also when Julie goes through your portfolio, she'll answer part of your question as well. Any questions?
No, I think
All right.
so, yeah.
Turn it over to
Julie?
Julie.
Yes, actually, I do have one, if you
Yeah.
don't mind. So this is a little bit sort of a speculative question, I guess, but so even though the price of housing is going up, is housing still one of the highest growth markets out there, or real estate in general?
It certainly has been over the past few years. Whether or not that's going to be the case moving forward, we don't know. There's a huge there's a larger disparity, and home affordability is not where it was certainly 10 years ago in many areas. And so that's an important equation to look at in terms of what are the incomes in a certain area versus what's happened with housing. And entry-level homes are getting difficult for a lot of individuals that come out of school, they have a newly minted degree, they get a great job, and they have to have 4 roommates.
Yeah, they can't buy houses.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
does that indicate that perhaps housing will have to adjust to that?
I think it will adjust, but the likelihood of us seeing the dynamics are different from where we were at in the financial crisis and how leveraged most individuals were. There was a mortgage company that was in the paper, and I think one day they were writing 7-to-1 no doc loans. Thank heavens we're not in that environment anymore, where you could walk in and theoretically say you make $100,000 a year and walk out with a $700,000 loan. That gets wrapped up into paper that people buy, and we all know the result of that back in the financial crisis.
We remember.
We're not in that environment anymore, thank heavens, and yield standards are tightening. So that's really a little bit of a safety net that we have this time versus prior, and consumer balance sheets are in a much better position now than they were back in 2006, 2007, and that period of time. I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I think mortgage rates going up as much as they have, up to 574 in the latest.
574?
Yes.
Really?
I mean, up 200 basis points in really a very short period of time. I think that's going to slow the rate of purchasing that's going on out there and the rate of appreciation. You know, we're not saying housing prices are going to fall immediately, but I think the rate of appreciation will slow. We've got a tremendous supply and demand imbalance out there, especially with all the migration during the pandemic. And, you know, if you could afford a house at 3%, you may not be able to afford it at 574. Right. So a lot of that, there's plenty of cash buyers out there still, but it's certainly going to take a bite out of the the market. Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too when you talk about $100,000 for a $700,000 home. Now we're seeing you make $100,000, and around here the homes are $7 million.
Right.
And that makes it really tough to put housing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, is it fair to look at the housing starts statistic and make any conclusions about what affordability might be?
It does on the supply side to some extent, because supply's been an issue. And so we want to see more housing starts, and theoretically that should help ease, but it's just almost impossible to make a determination of just how much. But just in general terms, it's nice to see an increase in housing starts just for the supply issue. That's been a problem.
I think I saw 1,700,000 something starts last year. That seems like a lot of houses.
We're kind of playing catch up, though. There were many years where we just didn't have a lot of building going on post-financial crisis. You know,
I
for
saw
many
the
years.
statistics for the Denver region recently with the state demographer on that, and people were like, "What do you mean they built this many houses then?" And it was really interesting information.
Yeah, they just stopped for a while.
She does an amazing job, Elizabeth Garner. She's amazing. Okay, I think we can keep moving. Thank you.
All right, well, let's take a look at the portfolio. I'll start on the objectives page. So we always like to start the review with a reminder of the objectives of the investment program. Safety of principal, first and foremost. Liquidity, followed by yield, or a commensurate rate of return. And we do measure performance vis-a-vis a market benchmark index, the 1 to 3 year. U.S. Treasury and Agency Index, and the strategy is to invest in the very high-quality fixed income instruments that are permitted by the county's investment policy and Colorado revised statutes. So on the following page, this is your compliance report. So we do check compliance before and after every trade and then report that back to you. And you see here all of the parameters of the county's investment policy, which is also commensurate with Colorado revised statutes. I will note also a few line items up from the bottom. We have the new parameters that were approved in the investment policy for environmental social governance and socially responsible investing. So we're checking that on a trade-by-trade basis as well. And you can see everything's in compliance. There is one asterisk at the bottom. There were some legacy securities that were inherited from a few years back that had a longer maturity. So those will roll off at some point, but everything else is in compliance. And on the next page, we can take a look at the high-level characteristics of the portfolio. So the middle column is where I'll focus. That is at the end of April, and we'll compare that to the benchmark index on the left and the prior quarter, end of January, on the right. You can see the average maturity and duration there at the top. Average duration It's a key indicator of how we manage risk in the portfolio. 1.74 years. You can see that is just short of the benchmark at 1.77. And that was by design in this rising rate environment to keep the portfolio slightly short of that benchmark duration. Your purchase yield is starting to move up. The purchase yield reflects all historical purchases in the portfolio. So that's starting to move upward at 91 basis points. The market yield, if we had to replace the entire portfolio as of April 30th, your market yield would have been 240. You can see that's moved up significantly from about 1% in the prior quarter, just reflecting the very dramatic shift in rates in the market. And then the quality is the U.S. government, AA plus and AAA, and the market value at the end of April, 71,380,408. And then moving forward, we'll take a look at some of the detail behind that. On the next page, we can see how that duration is allocated across the short end of the curve between 0 and 4 years, with the greatest allocations between 1 and 3 years, kind of in the middle of your chart there, and mostly government securities. So we have the dark green bar representing our U.S. agencies, the light gray representing U.S. treasuries, and then that little slice of cream color, if you will, is a supranational World Bank allocation there. And then on the following page, we can see vis-a-vis the index, the portfolio in the dark green bars between 0 and 4 years. It's a little bit more broadly distributed across the curve than the index. And that is by design to give you more liquidity on the short end, and then when we see opportunities to lock in rates on the longer end of our spectrum here. And then on the next page, we can see on the top, really stable, not much shift at all quarter to quarter in our allocations between treasuries and agencies. And we do expect that that will start to shift during the last 2 years, 2+ years throughout the pandemic. We had a very accommodative Federal Reserve, and that caused spreads to compress to practically nothing. So we bought a lot of U.S. treasuries. We're starting to see conditions shift as the Fed is becoming less accommodative, which is going to give us a little bit more spread opportunity in our agencies and perhaps some of our other sectors like our high-quality corporate bonds. So that environment will shift a little bit as we move forward. And then across the bottom, you see we've maintained a very stable duration at about 98% of the benchmark. And we do foresee a similar picture as we move forward here, maintaining that just short of the benchmark. On the following page, we can see a well-diversified portfolio between the various issuers. You can see U.S. Treasuries at the top, and then the various U.S. government agencies, along with our World Bank, which is International Bank of Reconstruction and Development. The few very small allocation to CMOs, those are mortgages, and those were the legacy securities, but they are government agency mortgages as well. And then on the next page, we hope this chart remains boring for a very long time. AA and AAA ratings, the U.S. government is rated in the AA category by S&P, AAA by Moody's, and this reflects the S&P ratings. And then on the following page, this is the investment performance. So this does require some explanation here. This is the total return performance of the portfolio over various time periods. And your portfolio is represented by the dark green bars versus the index, the 1 to 3 year index in the light gray. You will notice the 12-month and 2-year being negative. Now, the reason for that is because of the price movement. So as rates rise, and they rose extremely rapidly and pretty significant magnitude on the short end of the curve, it causes the prices of what you already own to decline. So there's a price component and an income component. So what you're seeing here is the negative impact on the prices of the securities that you already own. And you will also notice you are less negative than the benchmark index, which is our goal. So I will note over this time period, there was not a single fixed income index that was positive in terms of returns, and that was due to the rapid rise in rates. Now, as Scott mentioned earlier, now that we are investing in rate levels between 250 and 3% and not at 20 basis points, the returns should shift back to positive pretty rapidly as we move forward in time here. So we would expect to see that flip as we move forward. I can't tell you exactly when, but we wouldn't expect an extended time frame of negative returns. The Band-Aid has been ripped off, if you will, and we think the most pain has been inflicted already. We don't know where rate levels are going exactly and when they're going, but that's our viewpoint as of now. So you can see the 12-month and 2-year are negative, 3-year and since inception positive, and exceeding the benchmark index in each period. So we can't control where rates go and when they go. What we can control is the structure of the portfolio and how we manage that to beat the benchmark index. I'd also like to show you a chart on the next page, which really represents the income generation component of the portfolio. So you see it really follows the course of the interest rate cycle, and this is your purchase yield. So this 91 basis points pretty closely represents the income generation of the portfolio. And you can see we've bottomed out. We've hit that trough. The last few purchases we've made have been in the 270, 280 range. So you're going to start to see the trajectory of that turn around and come back up. And that really concludes the portion that we wanted to focus on, which is the managed portfolio. So I'd like to ask the group if you have any questions before we move on to the liquidity piece.
Does the board have any questions, comments?
Commissioner Child, did we answer your question that you had?
Steve, did you get an answer to your concern about should we spend now and do
Well,
capital
even
projects?
with, I mean, if we are getting yields of 2.9 and inflation's running, we're at 6% or something, whatever the inflation is running at, our money is still losing value. I'm glad to see that the yield rates are going up like they are, but we're still, the money's still losing value, which a lot of it we can't touch anyhow. It has to sit there by legal requirements. So it's good we're getting more a higher rate of return on that. Our discretionary money, I still think we should consider trying to push forward capital improvement projects. And I guess we could maybe have a discussion on that internally and with John, because it's tied into the cost of construction, which is like totally outrageous now. Do you have any predictions on where you think the construction costs will be going? There's a lot of money, the federal government's putting all the money into the, the infrastructure projects across the country, and I think that's probably contributing to driving the price of those construction projects up very high right now.
I just think there's a lot of factors involved. I think, you have higher input costs for construction because of the supply chain, and that hasn't worked itself out yet. We still have, COVID lockdowns in China, which is hopefully going to reach its end soon. We're starting to see some signs of that, but the supply chain is, heavily disrupted, which is influencing your input costs, and then you have accelerating labor costs. You have a supply and demand imbalance for labor. It's very hard to get workers, at least anecdotally from my experience, to do any construction these days. They're all very, very busy. Inflation is impacting every aspect of that. So yes, while you're losing money on a real basis, on an inflation adjusted basis, your construction is also going to be abnormally costly on both a materials and labor perspective. There's also, you know, and I'll get into the liquidity portion of the portfolio in a moment, which we don't manage, but we have visibility via reporting. You know, the county has had very healthy tax receipts, so the liquidity is in very healthy shape, but you also want to save for that rainy day because the economy has been booming with the reopening I say post-pandemic. We're still trailing on the ends of the pandemic. Economy has been booming. We've had the strongest growth since the mid-'80s, but that is going to wane, and it's not going to last forever. And you know, of course, you want to maintain adequate liquidity for the future rainy days ahead. So it's really a tough call to make. I think you know, it's a great time to build if you can, but it's also a great time to earn higher returns. I mean, we do start to see signs that inflation is peaking, perhaps. And a lot of that's due to the base effect, and those higher levels, just by the math of it, are going to roll off in the coming months, as soon as the next couple of months. So I think just by the math of it, we may have seen, or are going to have seen in the near future, the peak of inflation. Plus, as the Fed continues in their tightening and raising rates, we're going to see, and we've already seen, tightening financial conditions. So we should hopefully start to see some results from all of this in seeing inflation come down. So hopefully we get to that neutral point where you're earning more on your investments, you're seeing inflation come down, and you kind of get to a neutral point there. So I think there's a lot of factors involved on when you do your capital projects. And just from what we hear from our client base, there's more capital projects on the docket than historically ever. You know, I think we're just in this re-emerging, building, growing, let's get out there and live life again phase. So I just think there's a lot of considerations. It's really hard to say definitively one way or another, but it's certainly a good discussion for you all to continue.
You know,
I
we
think.
go out for RFPs and have nobody respond, or maybe one contractor. We had a recent project that we thought was around $2 million. The bid came in at $6 million.
Wow.
And that's kind of what we're seeing across the board. The city of Aspen's having the same issues, and you know, people are upset because our permitting process in our community development is timely. I mean, it takes a long time to get a permit, but right now you can't find a contractor or anybody to build it anyway. So
Exactly.
so you want to rush it through to wait. So it's this conundrum that we're seeing on all sides of it. Any more questions from the board at this point?
Patty, I was wondering if I could just weigh in real quick.
Of course
a
you
little bit
can.
on Steve's. And Scott used a word that maybe we'll want a little bit more definition on, Scott, because I think it makes answering Steve's question particularly difficult, and that's whether we're actually entering what you'd call a stagflation kind of period, which is it's a different economic cycle. I don't believe we've been in one since the late 70s, early 80s, and Scott and Julie, I know there's different schools of thought on cause and how you go in and out, but there are persistent problems with stagflation of persistent inflation, kind of not commensurate economic growth. And so pressure stays on our operations. So we're going to feel the inflationary pressures just to maintain operations, Steve. So I think from a budgetary perspective, and love to hear our professionals' comments on this, but it'll be a combination of trying to keep some powder dry, even though you are losing relative value on that in an inflationary market, because we're going to need to bridge. So that's maintaining a portion of it in fund balance, addressing inflationary pressures on our operations, which I think we're going to be really challenged to maintain workforce in this increasing inflationary environment. dealing with inflationary pressures on our current capital, and we're trying to make smart decisions. We're feeling the inflationary pressures differently, depending on whether we're building a structure or building a road. And we're trying to feel that out right now and make recommendations back to this body on moving forward, such as we are on, say, Brush Creek Road, versus holding like we are in the landfill, and trying to make smart decisions based on where we're feeling those pressures. But I do wonder, Scott and Julie, if there'd be a brief explanation of that scary stagflation word, because I think it's going to come up a lot during our budgeting process. Sure. Yeah, and like you said correctly, we really haven't had to deal with it since the late 70s, early 80s, and the Fed governor at that time, raising rates to the extreme levels, and I can't remember exactly what we got to. I think we were looking at 18% yields back in the early 80s to try and get that under control. And I think, every one of the FOMC members is a student of history, and they're keenly aware of that, and they were recently asked about that. And do they, more specifically, Chair Powell, think that they're going to have to react as they did back then, Paul Volcker to be more specific, and his answer was essentially no. The environment is different, but it is an environment where you have inflation and zero or no growth, and it's a horrible situation to be in, and that is a basis of and a reason why I believe, and our firm believes, that the Fed will be focused on the inflation part of the problem, not the growth part. I think, and again, this is just our opinion, that they're willing to sacrifice growth because they've got to get inflation under control, and they'll do what is necessary, meaning raise rates. I didn't talk too much about the quantitative side and quantitative tightening, and their balance sheet almost at $9 trillion. Where they're going to start reducing that, probably to the tune of 47.5 billion, and then ratchet it up to 95 billion by the end of the summer. And that's twice the amount of reduction they had from 2017 to 2019. And so those are some instruments that they're using and some tools they're using to try and get inflation under control, both on the longer end of the curve as well as the short end with raising rates. Because if they only use the overnight rate, it's not going to have any effect on any effect quickly on the 10-year to 30-year part of the curve, the longer term. But again, stagflation is not a environment that the Fed wants us to be in. And so I think, again, they would be willing to sacrifice the growth part of that discussion versus being really aggressive on inflation. I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
I guess the only other addition I would make is, if you think about Japan, they have been in that situation, and it's a lot to do with their aging demographics as well, and we're seeing a lot of that, not to that extreme, but here in the U.S. with the aging population and the extent of the boomer generation going into retirement, I think, doesn't give us favorable demographics for high growth going forward. So, it's something that is a difficult situation to manage, I think. I'm pretty glad I don't sit on the Federal Reserve Open Market Committee right now, because it's a tough job.
And the term you're using is stagnation?
No, stagflation.
Oh,
Yep.
Stagflation.
Yep, stagflation.
As in
Yep.
stagnant
So
inflation?
the stag being associated with the growth, and then the inflation, you still have inflation, because usually the two aren't correlated together at the same time.
Well, I think about it, just what we're experiencing. I mean, we're having like record, sales tax receipts, and yet, feeling constrained about being able to like solve community problems because we can't spend the money because the money doesn't have the value, or like household budgets, like people are making more money, but they're not feeling it in their pocketbooks, right? I don't know. That's how I like translate it into my local experience of like what stagflation looks like.
for us.
Yeah, you're right, yeah, you know, your paycheck comes in here and then your grocery bill comes in here and you're like, where did all that money go that I
Yeah.
just got that great raise?
Yeah. And, I talked at the beginning, the shape of the curve. It'll be interesting to see, maybe by the fall, as soon as the fall, when we're hopefully up here again, or early next year, we might see, again, the negative 2 to 10 relationship. The Fed will have theoretically raised rates significantly based on the transparency they're giving right now. And we might not see that relationship that we saw just a few weeks ago, steep relationship between the 3-month bill and the 10-year. It will be indicating that we're going to see a recession. So, they would never admit this, and they shouldn't admit this, but I think most of them would be okay with getting inflation under control by the beginning of 2023, if they can do that. And likely that we see a recession, but that recession is shallow. That's the most common outlook relative to what we're reading about right now in terms of, again, it's impossible to predict both interest rates, where inflation is going to be a year from now, if we're going to have a recession. But based on some of the relationships that we've gone through today, it would lend itself to believe that the possibility of a recession certainly is there within the next 24 months. The short end of the curve would not indicate that in the near term, next 6 months, but certainly in 2023, some are saying we're already in a recession, and they might be right. We'll see. Technically speaking, we'll see if we have 2 quarters of negative growth right in a row. We'll see.
So you've got inflation and you've got recession. And what do you have in the middle?
That is a conundrum that the Fed is in right now.
Can we make up a word for it and sell it? Yeah.
There you go.
We can be creative here on this board. We're going to come up in a new word that has a balance to inflation and recession. Even if it only lasts us for a very short period of time, I think we deserve it. Okay. I'm also not a good finance person, so. Okay, so we have some time to continue, and then we have our next. Hi, John. Nice to see you. Because I know you guys always have. We get fascinated by this information. Don't tell Ann that. I think Ann might have left the call, but.
Well, we will.
She had to go, Patty, but
Okay, we're good. We got it covered, John.
Good hands.
Well, we'll conclude with just a couple of comments away from the managed portfolio. So the county does have significant liquidity, as I mentioned, in the local government investment pools, $96 million as of the end of April, which is up significantly from January due to your tax collections. It's distributed between the various LGIPs here in Colorado. We're fortunate to have several. That has been well diversified, and then I'll just flip to section 3 on the consolidated information between the local government investment pools and the managed portfolio, $167.4 million at the end of April. So there are significant funds at the current time, and that is all we wanted to cover, but we just believe in continuing with the strategy, staying disciplined throughout the market cycle. Our firm has been doing this for over 30 years, as have both of us. So our goal is to keep your money safe and do the best we can with it, with the safety and liquidity constraints, and we'll make it through.
It's been a challenge. You guys have done a great job for us. Okay, board, we have time for some questions, some wrap-ups, some thoughts.
Just to say thank you.
That's always welcome, Greg.
Thank you.
Steve, did you have anything else?
Well, having done this for probably, all the number of years, looking at these kind of figures, every year I understand it better and better, and your explanations are very good. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Great
Yeah,
pleasure.
thank you guys so much. So interesting to me. I just love it.
Kelly?
Good.
I think I asked my question. It's nice to see you.
You too.
Mr. Peacock, did you have anything else that you wanted them to share with us to keep us on track and under control?
No, thank you, Patty. I really appreciate the picture that was painted. I hope the board has a sense that we have planned carefully. We do have liquidity, and we've got some really difficult conversations coming up ahead of us as we go into 2023 and beyond, and even in 2022 as we seek that balance of meeting the increasing community needs, keeping enough liquidity and fund balance so that we can weather whatever the next step this economic cycle is going to bring. And just appreciate you sitting through and understanding all of this.
Well, I'm gonna, Kelly,
Yeah,
real quick.
John, I have a question for you, I guess. I think we normally do kind of a mid-year budget update. I hope we schedule that, because I would look forward to seeing that sometime in July and just understanding how these factors are playing out in either department fund balances and needs for adjustment there.
Yeah, we will certainly do that. So we've got a mid-year supplemental process, so we'll be able to update the board on our revenues. I will preview for you. We are doing quite well. We were very conservative during the budget process, still not understanding how we were going to come out of COVID. It's been hot in terms of local sales tax collections and such. And so the board is going to have some room to Steve's point. I know, Kelly, you've had interest, others have had interest. And do we have resources to address more of these emerging community needs? I think the short answer is going to be yes. And we're going to have to find the balance to deal with inflation so we can keep what we got and keep some powder dry, because, you know, those fund balances aren't worth as much as they used to be in this inflationary environment. So we really want to focus on all three.
Thank you.
So, and in closing, and while we have the two gentlemen here with us from Colorado County Zinc, what we're gonna do in the next year or so is we're gonna amend the state constitution so Pickens County can get a real estate transfer tax. Just wanna give you guys a heads up on that. I have 4 more years, and I'm gonna get that done. All right, thank you guys.
I
It's
may
so
only
nice
have,
to
6
see you, and your
months.
drive was good coming up.
Yeah, it's great.
Any
Yeah.
major construction snafus? Because I'm heading down there tomorrow.
Actually, I don't think there was this
No.
time.
That's
Yeah,
good to
it was
know.
as
No.
smooth as, yeah.
It was fine.
Perfect.
I've
Are you,
ever-
are you going
ever
back
driven
now
out.
this afternoon?
We're going to the Ville Valley, and then we have
Oh.
some meetings there in the,
It's a lot more
area.
fun on this side of the mountain, you know.
I know, I
At
know.
I-74.
It's a little quieter here.
I said, I want to come up next time and plan for at least a night or two stay.
Yeah,
That'd
let
be
us
great.
know, let us know. It's so nice to see you.
Yeah, you
Thank you,
too.
we
Likewise.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for your
Take
time.
care, guys.
Okay, Mr. Peacock, it looks like you worked miracles for us.
And for
I don't
Patty.
think I'm the one that worked miracles. Our guest worked miracles on very short notice.
Thank you,
So,
guys. Thank you.
Would like to appreciate both of you for accommodating our schedule yet again. This is really a follow-up opportunity. Back towards the end of April, the board had signed a letter that was sent to John Swartout as the executive director, and then also the CCI board. Felix, I just lost your last name. I don't mean any disrespect. I apologize.
Absolutely no problem there.
Yeah. But really in response to the concerns that were raised in the letter, there was a request for an opportunity to meet face to face. And so we were able to get that scheduled for 4:15 today, now switched to 3:45. And again, appreciate you all making that adjustment. At this point, Patty, I would propose turning it over to our guests, and this was really their opportunity, I think, to maybe address the concerns. And John, am I turning it over to you first, or?
Yeah, thank you, John. I appreciate it. And thanks, commissioners, for making time for this. So I had talked to that, your county administrator, John Peacock, even before the letter, because it came up in a public meeting, that you had, all your meetings are public, so he had given me a heads up about that. And so when I got the letter, I'd already scheduled a Colorado County's Incorporated Board meeting to talk about your letter. So the board had a chance to review it and talk to myself, and Felix Lopez is the president of CCI this year. So we had a chance to look over it, and some of the issues. First and foremost, I want to tell you how much I appreciate Pickens County and your participation at CCI. We've done a lot of good work together, and I've worked with a number of you over the last year or so, and really appreciate and the value you add to this organization. So first and foremost, I want to say that. Second, I can address the issues in the letter, starting with the steering committee meeting on the 7th and 8th of, was it last month? I've lost track of time with the legislative session ending, but for whatever reason, neither Felix or myself witnessed the first two things, or I was in the room and I missed it. I can't remember. We both the president of the organization and myself and the steering committee chairs try to keep a tight watch on behavior, because in my 3 years here, I've really made an effort in cooperation with the board to create an environment that's conducive to, people being able to say what their views are. And as you know, we have, 61 counties. We're very diverse. We have incredible differences of opinion at times, but it's really important to the board and to me that people are respected, that there's a mutual respect, and there's an environment that's not, it doesn't get hostile or negative, and sometimes it does, and it's my role and the role of the president and the steering committee chair to keep a check on that, because obviously people are passionate about issues. We have serious disagreements, but yet when we work together, we're able to speak with one voice. We're able to influence policy, short-term rentals, behavioral health, opioid settlement are recent examples of when we all work together, we get enormous things done. But it's our job to make sure that decorum in the meeting is appropriate. And I have talked to, I wasn't aware of the first two comments raised in the letter, and I went back on the last day of the steering committee meetings. Commissioner from URA, Jake Neese, brought up those comments, and it's the first I'd heard of it. And so I addressed it with the person who made the comments. I wasn't aware who made the second comments. I think it was Clear Creek County. It was a Clear Creek County commissioner. I'm not sure, but I addressed it with them. I told them that making off-color jokes not acceptable at our meetings, and my understanding is that the first individual apologized to Jake Neese, who raised it with me prior to your letter. So that kind of behavior is not acceptable. When we do trainings for steering committee chairs, we try to instruct them on how to run the meetings, and a short course in parliamentary procedure. But I want you to know those kind of behaviors are not acceptable. When we catch them, we address them. And so that's the first issue. The second issue, the board addressed with the two individuals involved in the comment of, it was conversation between two commissioners in which one called the other a doll, and we addressed it with both commissioners, and Felix, you can chime in, but both commissioners felt like, the board asked them to address it, and they asked them to address it with the steering committee at the upcoming meeting, and both, the first individual was not offended by the comment, but we made it clear that other people in the room were offended by the comment. And so we asked the two of them to work it out and to make some kind of a statement together on that. So that we did discuss at the board meeting, and the two individuals said that they would address it themselves, that they preferred to do it. And so that's that issue. The Tina Peters issue, and I'm happy to take any questions at any time. Just interrupt me, please.
I'll let you know, John, if I see anybody here that wants to.
Okay.
Thanks.
The Tina Peters issue was kind of interesting because the background on that is the county clerks asked to meet with our members. The county clerks have an association, and a former Jefferson County clerk is the president of that association. And they asked for a meeting with our members to talk about the election bill. We agreed that it was probably wise to do that. They were actually hoping that we would take a amend or neutral position on the bill because they were working amendments. Usually when we work with our county clerks, we help them, but if it's their lane, we let them do the work and then we assist. So we agreed to a Zoom call meeting with the county clerks. They wanted to go through what amendments to the election bill that they were working on. They thought they were in pretty good shape at getting the amendments they needed to go to at least, not oppose the bill, but get even perhaps to a support position on the bill. So they asked for the meeting. We invited county commissioners. I had no idea who the County Clerks Association was inviting. I don't know if they sent a group email to their county clerks. So about 3/4 of the way through that meeting, county clerk from Mesa County, Tina Peters, who's in the middle of controversy and other legal issues in Mesa County and statewide with the Secretary of State, jumped on the call and started basically giving her line about the election and everything. And both Eric Bergman and myself had to step off that call to deal with another issue. And our staffer texted me and said, Tina Peters is on the call. No one appreciates what she's saying. Do I have permission to just shut down the call? And I gave her permission to shut down the call, and she shut down the call. That was unfortunate, for sure. We, like any Zoom call, it's a public meeting. Members of the public can jump on. She's currently still a county clerk, but we in no way endorsed it. And as a matter of fact, when she started and a couple other people had joined the call started in, we just shut down the call, which was about the only thing we could do at that point. We didn't invite her. I don't know that the County Clerks Association invited her either, but we shut it down as fast as we could. But the staffer needed permission for me to shut down the call. I gave her that permission and she shut down the call. So that's what happened. We were no means trying to give anyone a platform on such a controversial issue. The point of the meeting was for the county clerks to brief us, and they had hoped that we would also get to an amend position, which is actually the position we ended up taking on the bill. So the county clerks, we appreciate our relationship with them. We support them, and they're supportive of county commissioners as well. So, that's the story there. The press conference, you raised issues about the press conference. Frankly, I agree with you, but the backstory on the press conference is that I was in Craig meeting with Senator Hickenlooper and the Northwest counties to talk about sage grouse and coal transition and other things. And I got a call from a board member who asked me if I knew that a press conference was scheduled on collective bargaining at the Capitol the next day. And I said, no, I was not aware of a press conference that was scheduled at the Capitol. And so a number of our members that felt strongly about collective bargaining had decided on their own to do a press conference. there were a number of things when I looked at it, and I shared it with Eric Bergman, who was on our staff, and Commissioner Lopez, who's the president of our organization. I shared it with him, and I said, I have a number of concerns about this. We were in a opposed position on collective bargaining. 75% of our members voted to oppose the bill. We were involved in trying to get amendments, so was CCAT, and so was especially Arapahoe County and Larimer County were also seeking amendments to the bill at the time. So I had left the steering committee to go meet with the Senate president, but and supported everyone's amendments, not just amendments that CCI had sponsored. However, this press conference was troubling because the people involved in it were inviting Americans for Prosperity, and my comment on that was Americans for Prosperity have probably attacked every Democrat county commissioner in the state. I don't appreciate having a group like that associated. I said, however this turns out, it will look like CCI is involved in the press conference, even though we're not, and I'm really wishing that you wouldn't do this. So those were my comments. I decided in consultation with Commissioner Lopez to try to steer the press conference in a different direction. Frankly, if I'm in an opposed position, I know how many votes I need to get on the Democrat side in both the House and the Senate, and it's a math problem. I mean, if you want me, if I'm told to oppose a bill, I'll oppose a bill, and my staff will too. However, I know how the math works, and so anything that we do should be trying to get bipartisan support to defeat the bill. That's the only way you can do it. It just makes sense. So at the last minute, I took over the press conference, and we invited as many other members as we could. And I took it over, one, to get rid of Americans for Prosperity and to get rid of the rancor that was part of their press conference and get rid of anything that would be detrimental to our purpose. And so that's on me. I made that decision, and I made it because I thought, boy, either way, this is a lose-lose. Either way, it's a lose-lose for us. If I let them go forward with Americans for Prosperity and all this other stuff, all it's going to do is cause turmoil within our membership, as well as turmoil within the legislature, because it looks like a partisan act, not an act of a bipartisan organization. So I made the decision to try to take over that press conference, or at least influence it to get rid of the rancor, and that's on me. I had less than 24 hours to make a decision and do something about it. That was the decision that I made, because I thought that if they went forward, I would still get the blame for it, and it would be far worse. The impact would be far worse. So I just made that decision in consultation with the president, and that's on me. It could be that I made the wrong call, but I felt like letting them go forward and making a mess out of this would create even more turmoil within the membership. That was my goal, and so that one's on me. I did that, and I did it for what I thought was the best interest of the organization.
Thanks, John. And I'm going to look to Commissioner Lopez. Hi, it's nice to meet you. I haven't met you before. I wish we were in person, and hopefully someday we will be, to meet each other. Is there anything you want to add to what John has said? John, I really appreciate what you're saying. And before I turn it to my board members, Commissioner Lopez, if you'd like to add anything.
Certainly. Thank you so much, my fellow commissioners. What an opportunity for all of us to serve our counties. One of the, in fact, my apologies, I see John was texting me, and we just left the Board of County Commissioners meeting as well. So I ran home and I was able to get in. So thank you for the opportunity, but I can tell you with sincerity of heart, the very moment that anything attempts to create additional divide, I'll be the first one to reach out to John. And one of the great opportunities that we have here is that John and I spend so much time on the phone, communicating and being honest with each other. We had an emergency meeting once we received your your letter. And as John said it so very eloquently, I don't need to add on to any of the comments that he made. He explained that we spent an hour the Friday of the last session that we had in Denver, and I specifically drove to Denver because I care about this membership. When you look at 115 years of history through CCI, and you look at the bipartisanship that we have been able to achieve, and the good things that come out of this whole thing. Las Animas County, we are the largest landmass county in the state of Colorado, but when it comes to population, we don't have it. So definitely we need the help of other counties to get the benefits of an association like this one. And I tell you one thing, I'm passionate about what I do, and I hope that the opportunity for us to visit with you, this is not the first one, but many of them, because, you know, I tell you what, I've met Kelly, if I may call her by her first name, Commissioner McNicholas Curry, and I'm just impressed with the knowledge that all of us bring to the table. Steve and I, we went through some commissioner orientation together. Commissioner Child, just powerful. We were invited to a couple of conferences with related to Colorado's insurance and medical and so on and so forth. Before I got elected, I used to run a primary care clinic. Prior to that, just a little bit of me, I was president of a small college. So I think the opportunity to come to us and in perhaps this communication sometimes is so good, it could be so good that we overlook some of the things. But let me close with this. My last statement is that we understand the passion that was involved in the last couple of sessions, but the mutual respect is where I come from. We have to obviously extend that to one another, and I believe that CCI is that much better and stronger because of the membership that it currently has and will continue to be. I just want us to, for me personally, say thank you for the opportunity to be here, and you're right. I was actually ready. I told John, we'll drive up there because I'm looking at John's background. You know, we don't have any water here on the dry part of the state. You guys seem to be the God's country, but nonetheless, those are my comments, and I don't want to add on to what John said. Thank you for the opportunity, my fellow commissioners. I know we have some challenges either way in front of us, and we're all standing for our constituents, which is the call that they put us in these positions for. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to call you Felix, if that's okay, Commissioner Lopez, and you can call me Patty. But I've been involved for 20 years with CCI, and with about 20 years with Northwest Colorado Council of Governments. So I truly believe that we have diverse entities in both of those organizations, and we work best when we sit at the table and are upfront and honest with each other and decide the different directions we can go in together and how we can get things done. So I appreciate the further explanation of the issues that were brought forward to the entire Pickens County Board of Commissioners. And I am going to look to my fellow commissioners to see if anybody would like to make a comment. Greg, please. This is Commissioner Greg Postman.
Hi, Commissioner Lopez, it's really nice to meet you. John, great to see you. Thank you for your explanation. Looking back at the issues, of course, I wasn't at that meeting, so I only heard what I heard from my fellow commissioner, Kelly McNicholas Curry, and it was quite disturbing. And it sounds as if you've spoken to the commissioners involved, and they've agreed that they're going to reach out somehow. But it seemed a little nebulous what will actually happen. So my question here for today is, what's actually the follow-up? You know, what protocols or procedures need to change in a situation like that with the two commissioners they're going to come up with an apology or a mea culpa or something to explain or apologize, I don't know what. Or maybe it just will require an information session of some sort. Regarding the clerk's call, same sort of thing. It looks like it went off the rails. It looks like it was hijacked, quite honestly. And so what happens? What happens next? What's the protocol? Because it seems as if this may be the new game. Regarding the press conference, same sort of deal. This group comes in and all of a sudden you're not driving the bus. And you got to figure out how to get back on that bus. And it sounds like you made the Hail Mary to try to save the situation. But it's like, boy, could this happen again? And what's going to, you know, how are we going to avoid this in the future? I guess that'd be my question for you. You know, things got out of control, work to get it back. What needs to change in order to, you know, the relationships with the Clerks Association? I guess at this point on, I really want to see their agenda before I get in bed with them, so to speak. Anyway, those are my questions. What changes in order to help us get through this? Because I believe completely, and I really trust the sincerity of Commissioner Lopez and you as well in trying to make this long-standing, centuries-long relationship work. Although I've never been a super engaged with CCI personally, I do appreciate when I'm able to call John and ask him to help me talk to the governor or something. It's really been useful. So that was my question. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm happy to answer that. On the Tina Peters one, first of all, the Clerks Association did not appreciate what she did. So they were apologetic, and they were asking and communicating at the same time that my staff was communicating with me on shutting down the call because they didn't want to give her a platform. So I want to be clear about the Clerks Association. They're working cooperatively with the Secretary of State and the Governor's office, and they wanted to get to a good place on that legislation. So they're by no means at fault. She bombed the meeting, and we all agreed to shut it down. So I think though protocol with Zoom meetings, it's been a learning experience for all of us with hybrid meetings, and we've tried to put protocols. By their very nature, if we have more than 2 commissioners from any county, technically it's a public meeting. And so what we've talked to the people that run those calls about is, you know, do you leave some space at the end for public comment? And if someone tries to make a comment that's not a commissioner on our call, they have to wait to the very end to make that comment. So we have talked to our staff that runs those calls and come up with a protocol for how do you deal with that, because they are public meetings. So and we're transparent. We're about transparency. So if they're a public meeting, then you can have public comment at the end. That's how we're going to deal with that. I think being on the press conference, you know, I talked to the board about that. I took responsibility for the decision, and I think the solution there is that no event happens that's a CCI event without the express approval of the board. So that's the protocol there. We didn't have a lot of time, and I did talk to the board, but we're going to make it more formal. And I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of strain right now between our members on various issues. Collective bargaining was a nasty one for someone like me that came here to try to build bridges and try to get more participation and membership and to create an environment where it was safe for people to express their opinions. I'm really disturbed that if Commissioner McNicholas Curry felt in any way, that's disturbing to me how, you know, and I talked to her as well, but that was disturbing to me that I've done everything I can to create an environment of mutual respect. Mm-hmm. And if that's not happening, that's on me, and it's on the board, and it's on the steering committee chairs. And we need to stop the meeting and tell people that behavior is inappropriate. We've had situations more recently where people have made personal attacks. I mean, you can be passionate about an issue and say your piece, but we have to draw the line at anyone making a personal attack. Not appropriate, not acceptable, will not be tolerated. And we have to enforce that from my point. And I do that when I'm in meetings. Usually I'm texting people saying, cut that out, or, you know, that's not appropriate, or whatever. But when Commissioner Lopez is in the room, he does the same. And we need to get better at it. this session was probably the worst one I've been through in terms of it. Most of the time we agree on 90% of the issues that we're in agreement, even with the other organizations. We're in agreement. And that 10% we have to watch carefully, because personal attacks or creating an uncomfortable environment is not acceptable.
Okay, John, I
Not
think,
acceptable.
yeah, I think Kelly wants to add something in here, so.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you both taking the time to come before the board and to my boards, sort of weighing out of these, I think, conflicts and concerns. But I just want to sort of illustrate a little bit in my experience about what I think has worked really well in CCI and what I think has sort of gone off the rails a bit. And, for me, I think the really effective moments of my participation of CCI have been like when we convened around CARES Act funding, or when we were working at the beginning of the pandemic to kind of lobby understanding at the agency level for what counties were going through and what we needed and different resource asks, et cetera. Or for when Ginny helped convene the stakeholder conversation around short-term rentals that both, Dick Elsner and I sat on and ran. Those are things that for me really brought, I think, a bipartisan voice together to share ideas, to debate concerns, and to actually govern and figure out the best approach to governing. And, that's where I've taken the most benefit as kind of Pickens County, which is also the more minority opinion on a lot of the topics that we debate, and still sees a lot of value in CCI. Where I think it begins to fall apart is at the steering committees where we're taking positions on bills, and that real like cut and dry, you're on one side or the other, becomes a lot clearer, and we lose, I think, track of the fact that the point is to be at the table to govern and to find that the best pathways forward. And, John, I think you're taking on too much responsibility personally as the director, and from like the staff point of view. What I would really like to see is for the CCI membership to see value in Pickens County, or other outlying voices that are at the table at CCI, and to defend that presence and to say Pickens County, they may ultimately really take a different point of view, but they may have some perspective and points of governing that are valuable here. And that's not coming through, I think, in the steering committee conversations. Just this emboldened partisan political nature that we're all living our commissioner worlds in, I think is getting brought into those steering committee decorum. And so the things that I think have really been valuable about CCI are not getting carried over into those political conversations where we have to take positions, yet I think still we should be able to have, and I don't know what that looks like, but have some, establishment of like, we're going to respect the minority voice. We're going to respect the, minority position, because in something like collective bargaining, that minority position was trying really hard to advocate for amendments that protects counties ultimately overall, as just one example. But, that to me continues to be where the divide is, that I think other commissioners and other counties at the table, not relying on staff to do this, but relying on the other members of CCI to see the value and to defend it because of what they get out of it and what it does for our credibility, CCI's credibility as an organization. So it's a little bit of my reaction.
Steve's got his hand up here. And I agree.
Thank you, Patty. I was going to speak to the same issue about the respect or lack of respect that Pickens County has received over the years. Both starting 9 years ago when I would go to CCI or to Club 20, people were bad-mouthing they would say Aspen. They would always say Aspen. They were bad mouthing Aspen, and Pickett County was the embodiment of Aspen. So Pickett County was bad. In so many comments from so many different commissioners and members of Club 20 9 years ago, it's way, way less now than it used to be. It's way better, but it is still there. You'll hear comments a lot of times from somebody bad mouthing Aspen, or lately it's been Byron Pelton, who grew up in Basalt, kind of teasingly bad mouthing Basalt because I used to be his school bus driver at the Basalt schools. But the feeling is still underlying this kind of a prejudice against some of the minority counties like Pickett County and San Miguel County, Boulder County. Boulder County just chose to leave CCI, I think partly because of that. And I will never forget my very first CCI meeting that I went to when I was a commissioner-elect. I wasn't even in office yet, and I walked in dressed as a rancher, who I was, with, Western boots on and, a Western shirt and whatnot. And the 3 Delta County commissioners at the time, none of them are still serving now, but all 3 of them looked at me, looked at my name and where I was from, and their jaws dropped when they saw a rancher from Pickett County as a county commissioner. And I think that was just the beginning of a long process for me of trying to always be reasonable and be at the table and listening, trying to reach compromises on issues with people from the other political party. And I think over the years, things have gotten better, but there is still somewhat of a lack of respect for entire counties just based on, longstanding prejudices against them or against perhaps super rich people in Aspen or something. I'm not sure where it all comes from, but and I would tell people that 25% of the people in Pickett County are living at below the federal poverty level of a certain whatever level we are at for federal poverty level. We have a lot of really ordinary people here who are way more of them than the super rich people, but this prejudice still persists. And Felix, I was thinking you might be jealous of all the water in the lake there behind John Peacock. And I wanted to let you know that lake, that's Williams Lake. Williams' family was an old-time ranching family here in my valley where I live. And that's about 7 miles from my house to where that photograph is. So it always makes me want to be up there when John has that as his backdrop. I thought you would get a kick out of that.
Felix, you're welcome anytime to come up and play in Steve's Lake. No problem.
You know what, and I tell you one thing, I think this conversation, from my perspective, the recommendations, we hired John Swartout. I've known John for 20 years through the processes of legislating via higher ed and so on. We crossed paths. And Commissioner McNicholas Kelly, if I may, I think you put your finger on something powerful. How do we disseminate a lot of the responsibilities? At the end of the day, when you are the COO, the CEO, the executive director, all fingers point back to you. But I think we have an opportunity in front of us to work with John and to continue to work on the issues that we're talking about here. And Steve, I don't want you to feel bad because, when I was in higher ed, I wore a cowboy hat every now and then, maybe every Labor Day, and people would say, well, wait a minute, since when did you become a cowboy? You know what? My background allows me to do that. But at the same time, I bring to this role and to my elected position humanity before I bring anything else. And that's what I want you all to take, if nothing else. And I tell you one thing, I've have gotten to know John probably better than anything, and the sincerity of what we're doing and working directly with the board has been communicated on every one of these issues. We have gone back and forth. So I don't want to belabor the point. I think all of these points are well taken, and I am going to take you up on the invitation to come up. My family and I need to take a little break and possibly drive through there and pick up the phone, and who knows, maybe we'll catch up, put those cowboy boots, Steve, and we'll go ski on, water skiing on that lake. So, you know, it's to us. Let's use every venue to communicate, and yes, and let's keep us accountable. One of the good points that came out of the meeting is the board meeting. There is no anything behind that's going to be hidden. So the communication was exactly what we're having here. So from my perspective, I want to say thank you to all of you, my fellow commissioners. John Peacock, I want to thank you for setting up this meeting, and I can tell you that the responsibilities of being a county commissioner in many cases are greater than, because we're on the ground, we are where the action is happening. And so certainly I want to say thank you and appreciate this opportunity to come here. And like you said, Patty, next time we'll do it face-to-face.
That would be
And
great.
it's going to be under a different circumstance with a different topic. And I look forward to that.
Yeah, and you know, I think there's something about, you know, when you're at the business table and things get stressful and heated discussion, and then there's a great opportunity when you can, you know, meet and greet, have a barbecue, have just a get together, and you see people at different levels, and I think that's important, and I see great benefit in that. But having the two of you join us today, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time. And Steve, I'm going to let you, because we're going to try and wrap this, but Steve, if you want to, let me just see, Francie, did you have anything that?
No, I'm good. Thank you guys so much for coming to this meeting. We really appreciate it.
So
And,
Steve, unless you're going to invite us to another great lake or swimming somewhere.
So I think the pandemic has really affected things over the last 2 years, not being able to meet in person. And there, oftentimes, I mean, we are still having, the pandemic is still happening here. There are still people testing positive for COVID. And so I've been tending to just attend the CCI meetings virtually and not in person. And I think that has actually hurt CCI to some extent, because I remember some of the after hours meetings, you know, going to a bar with different commissioners. And I remember sitting down with Barbara Kirkmeyer, and we had a lot in common. We talked over a beer one time for a long time and got to know each other on a personal level instead of just, you know, this political fighting thing at CCI. And something like that really helps CCI to function better when commissioners can meet in person. So Francie and I will both be at this summer meeting in Vail in person, not trying to do anything virtually for that. But I hope as time goes on, we can do more in-person stuff. And I think that will help the whole organization get along better.
Great, thanks, Steve. Greg, did you have anything in closing? And then I'm going to let Mr. Peacock, John?
Just thank you again, Commissioner Lopez and John, for responding to our letter. And I'm sure our board will continue to have conversations and direct interactions with you. So appreciate it.
Patty, can I make one more comment?
Of course you can, John.
This is sincere. When I took this job 3 years ago, and I wasn't sure I wanted the job because I was friends with, you know, Commissioner Houck in Gunnison County, and you know, having worked on Gunnison sage grouse and other things, and spent 20 years in land conservation, and even working with Dale Will in Pickens County when I was director of GOCO. But I wasn't sure I wanted the job, and I wanted an assurance from the board at the time that they were in this to make it better. Because there were times where it got partisan in the past and left permanent scars with people. And I'm a bridge builder. I mean, I've always been in the middle, trying to get people to work together. And I said to the board at the time, can't do this by myself. I need the board to commit to this. And they did commit. And we've got diversity in our steering committee chairs now. We've got diversity on our board that we didn't have before. I've really worked hard at it, but there are still things that need to be addressed, and it constantly needs to be checked. Because it's easy to be partisan. It's like going downhill. You know, when you change the behavioral health system because Tamara Pogue from Summit County and Byron Pelton from Logan County worked together for 2 years to create transparency there. That's the value of working together, but it's something you have to constantly work on, and I reaffirm that with this current board, that I can't do it without their help. I need their help, because it's easy in the times we live in to be partisan. It's harder to do the hard work of figuring it out and creating mutual respect, but I'm committed to that. I've always been committed to that. When it doesn't happen, it hurts the staff here. The board's aware of that, but just my commitment is to do better. And because my goal is mutual respect. It's the only thing that works in the politics that bipartisanship has gone on the federal level. It's evaporated at the state level. The county level is the only place that it still exists in some form, and we need to make it bigger.
Great. Thank you, John. Thanks. Again, my thanks. Everybody good? Gentlemen, have a great evening. We appreciate it. Stay well, stay safe. And again,
Nice
a
to
huge
see
thank
you.
you. Nice to see you. Okay, back to my board. We are done for the day. We ended on a nice note here, I think.
Patty, I
So,
had one more open discussion, if you'll indulge me.
John, I knew it.
Sorry, I just didn't get to it beforehand, but it's a quick update. There was an article in the Colorado Sun today, don't know if any of you saw it, that said we and I believe Eagle County are challenging the census, the population. That is an item that has not been brought back to the board yet. Staff is still working through the process and kind of the benefits of challenging. We certainly agree with the premise of the article that there was population missed in the census count in Pickens County, but we're also looking at the process and the likelihood of success. So staff is still preparing to bring that back to you, despite what the article had represented. So if you'd seen that, I just wanted to clarify that for you.
Well, John, that came up at the Northwest Cog Economic Development Symposium. The reporter was in the room, and it came up with the state demographer's presentation, because people were concerned about census and everything based on this current census when it wasn't really a final census. So that's where that came out of, and it was just mentioned there that there were 2 counties who were looking into it. So just to clarify for the board, you know, in the press, and I'm sure got a hold of Mick Ireland, and I think that's the direction. I haven't seen the article, but I have a feeling that that's where a lot of that conversation came from.
Yeah, and the only factual miss was that hasn't come back to you. We haven't gotten direction from the board yet as to whether we're challenging or not, and we're still working through the benefits and likelihood of success, you know, whether it's worth doing.
Thanks for the heads up. Anything else from the board? No, we're good? All right, guys, have a good evening, and I will
Safe
see you guys
travels,
next
Patty.
week. Yeah?
Safe travels.
Yeah, no, I can't. You know it is.
Bye.
And,
Thank you.